Hey, thank you for clicking on the video. My name is Kaylee, and this is Read Rant Review, where, you guessed it, I read books and I do rant reviews. I give you a beat-by-beat, chapter-by-chapter breakdown of a book that either I read recently, that you guys voted for or recommended. Somehow these books end up on my radar, and I quite literally cannot help myself. I have to yap about it on the internet. So today we're going to be deep diving the book Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. If you are unfamiliar, I'll go ahead and read you his author profile on Goodreads real quick. I'll read you about what the book is exactly before we get into it. A couple other disclaimers, and then we'll dive right in. So Chuck Tingle, again, according to his Goodreads author profile, is a mysterious force of energy behind sunglasses and a pink mask. He is also an anonymous author of romance, horror, and fantasy. Chuck was born in Home of Truth, Utah, and now splits time between Billings, Montana, and Los Angeles, California. Chuck writes to prove love is real, because love is the most important tool that we have when resisting the endless cosmic void. Not everything people say about Chuck is true, but the important parts are. Crazy. So his most popular book was also his debut into the thriller horror realm, which was Camp Damascus, published in 2023. Currently on Goodreads, it's sitting at a 3.87 with nearly 25,000 ratings. And lucky for us, that's the book that we're going to be talking about. A searing and earnest horror debut about the demons the queer community faces in America, the price of keeping secrets, and finding the courage to burn it all down. They'll scare you straight to hell. Welcome to Neverton, Montana, home to a God-fearing community with a heart of gold. Nestled high up in the mountains is Camp Damascus, the self-proclaimed most effective gay conversion camp in the country. Here, a life free from sin awaits, but the secret behind that success is anything but holy. Very heavy topic that we're going to get into today. Obviously, this is about a conversion camp and the horrors that the campers go through. It's also just the process of being queer in such a community, right? So it is a very heavy topic. It's horror, so there is some body horror type stuff that happens, general homophobia. For this particular series on the channel, I will not be providing a trigger or content warning beyond what I just said to you, because I don't want to spoil anything. Usually, if you're new to the channel, hey, I will go through and give you a content or trigger warning so that you know what we're going to get into. So you can prepare or make sure that this is the right video for you. But this current series that I'm doing, it just feels a little counterintuitive to the plot itself or to the intent of thriller novels in general. So I advise you to look it up on your own if that's something that you're concerned about. If we get to anything particularly bad, I'll try to give a heads up if I remember to, but I'll gloss over most of the gory stuff. Like I said, body horror, but also this book is body horror involving insects, insects inside of your body. So if you're not cool with that, I would hop off this book immediately, okay? That's literally kind of the entire premise, is these flies inside of the body, okay? So I will tell you that much at least. So it's really that, even the thought of it in my throat, I get the bad feeling. You need to be aware of that. Viewer discretion is advised. The other two disclaimers that I like to provide on my videos is that this review is not for the author. It's not for friends, fans, family, stans, anything of the like. My reviews are for readers. I'm just here to talk about this book. Right, that's my intent. Don't make it weird. And lastly, is that this will contain all of the spoilers. Like I said, beat by beat, chapter by chapter breakdown. Not sure what else you would expect. If at any point you want to click off so you can go and read this for yourself, or if it's a little too heavy or whatever, fully support you, bestie. Do what works for you, okay? No hard feelings here whatsoever. The very, very final thing before we get into this is just a tiny bit of self-promo just to say, hey, I also upload these rant reviews in video form over on Spotify if you want to go and check me out over there. I also advise, if you want to hear me talk about books even more, check me out on Bindery. Bindery now has an app, so it is, I would say, a full-blown book-focused, solely book-focused, book-oriented social media type app. Highly recommend you checking that out. I have links to all of that stuff in the description box below. Without further ado, let's begin. Lucky for us, coming out of the Frida McFadden book that had 60 chapters. This one only has 13, and they're named. We haven't had named chapters in a while in most of the books that I've read, so I really did enjoy that. So 13 chapters, 246 pages, pretty short, pretty not sweet read, but pretty short read. Chapter number 1 is called Leap of Faith, and we are introduced to our main female character, and just our main character in general, Rose Darling. Rose Darling is 20 years old, and she is hanging out with a bunch of her high school friends. I'll talk about that in a second. And they are cliff jumping. I grew up in Arkansas, and we would drive like an hour and a half to Heber Springs. If you know, you know. Heber Springs was just these like really, really clear waters. I feel like all the freaking teenagers in like central Arkansas drove up there to jump off the cliffs. And so this was so nostalgic for me reading this particular chapter. So her and all of her friends are up there, up on the cliffside, chit-chatting, taking turns jumping, and she is just watching from the edge of the crowd. Really, she's only talking to one person, and that is her friend Martina. And we get the dynamic pretty quickly that they all come from a very, very religious town. Rose in particular comes from a very, very devout family, and so she is significantly more like ingratiated in, the gospel and the teachings and whatnot than her friends are, and particularly Martina, kind of per this conversation. So while they're talking, Martina brings up Peter Pan. For a brief moment, I consider telling Martina that she shouldn't read that stuff, that the only magic she needs is in the love of Christ, but I hesitate. I've had these conversations before, and even in a town as God-fearing as Neverton, there are only so many who want to hear it. Most Christian folks are friendly enough, but the second you start rubbing their faces in these little indiscretions, they bristle. The last thing I want to do is to make Martina bristle. And there's a little bit of awkward silence, and so then Martina asks, "Did you have to read that your freshman year?" She asks, clearly noting the pained expression on my face, and I'm so desperately struggling to avoid. I shake my head, no. I reply flatly, rejecting explanation. The truth is, I do remember Peter Pan being assigned an English class, and I remember the reports that accompanied this classic secular tale from James Matthew Barrie. I could tell you where the author was born, Scotland, and how he died, pneumonia, or even let you in on the fact that he killed off an equally profane and godless character, Sherlock Holmes, in a non-canonical short story well before Sir Arthur Conan Doyle ever had the chance. These facts about the author create a window into his work, not a door. It's a window I've never crawled through intentionally. Or even my class, Martina continues. I thought everyone read it. Once again, I'm put to the test, reaching the familiar crossroads of how forthcoming I should be. I love Jesus. I really do. But Jesus would want me to be cool. He'd want Martina to think I'm cool, which made me laugh. And so she ends up telling Martina that her parents didn't allow her to read it and kind of tries to leave it at that. So Martina exits this conversation by promptly running off the edge of the cliff and jumping into the water. And Rose is just watching her, absolutely fascinated by this gorgeous, gorgeous girl, right? Shortly after, a young man named Isaiah, this is one of her classmates, somebody that she's grown up with, that she's really close with, Isaiah approaches and asks Rose if she's going to jump in the water as well. And she says that she was thinking about it, and she notices all these people kind of giggling and whispering about them. Rose does not realize this, but everybody is giggling because the assumption is that her and Isaiah are going to date or are dating, or that there's little, whispers, they're going to jump off the cliff together, and it's this really cutesy relationship signifying thing. But Rose does not clock this. What she does clock is that there has been more and more awkward tension between the two of them, and it always looks like he wants to say something to her but doesn't. And it's just kind of their friendship is getting more and more uncomfortable. As she's standing there, contemplating jumping in, she's looking across the water, and she looks up, and across the lake, along the tree line, there is a woman. A frighteningly pale woman is standing in the forest, her long hair black as it hangs limply over her face and around her bony shoulders. It appears she's staring directly at me, but it's difficult to tell because her eyes lack irises or pupils. They're solid white globes. The woman is smiling, her expression frozen and her teeth unusually stained with brown and black smears. The teeth themselves are crooked and long, as though her gums have receded to provide an unnatural length. Yet despite all of this, the strangest thing about the woman's appearance is what she's wearing. She sports a deep red polo shirt with a stark white name tag pinned to the chest. It's some kind of top that you would expect to see worn by someone arriving to fix your wireless internet or telling you which aisle to check at a department store. Sorry, this fly just appeared. Or which aisle to check at the department store. She also wears a thick metal band around her neck, pulled tight like a collar, and khaki pants. So she's like, do you see that? Isaiah does not, right? As soon as he looks up, she like retreats into the tree line. And Rose tries to ignore this because she's like, okay, well, maybe it was just like a parent checking on their kid or something. Like maybe, I don't know. She just kind of feels weird. And so Isaiah grabs her hand. They get kind of like pressured, saying that she's been taking too long and whatnot. And they end up jumping into the water together. And when she does, she's thinking that there are a few precious moments of high school left, but this one feels like the pinnacle of summer. When she comes out of the water, she's saying how like refreshed and amazing that she feels and that it kind of almost felt like adjacent to a baptism of sorts. And when she comes up and Isaiah comes up, they share a look. And again, he has that like kind of awkward, like he wants to say something to her. And so she feels really uncomfortable after a while. Then she ends up like splashing him in the face and swimming away. He drives her home that night. Yet again, he is just like staring at her, checking her out the entire time. When he drops her off, she tries to get out of the car as quickly as possible to run inside of her house. He follows her, and he's like, hey, Rose, wait a second. Goes up to her. He kisses her. And then she pulls back very, very quickly. I'm sorry, I didn't. That was... Oh, I thought. Isaiah stammers. Gradually, the true nature of this moment falls into place with breathtaking clarity. I shake my head, my lips tightly sealed as I let this gesture do the talking. So you're not... Isaiah is still having trouble completing a sentence. Definitely not, I reply. But I thought... He repeats, a surprisingly meek moment for this typically stalwart guy. Nope, I say as my head continues to shake from side to side. He goes back to his car, punches the passenger door, gets inside, and then like speeds off enough to be like spraying gravel like from her driveway, like all over the road or like the air. You know what I'm saying? He like does like a spin out basically. Bad reactions all the way around, right? From him anyway. Hers was just more uncomfortable, but like bad reaction from him. When she goes inside, her mother and father are there. They have made spaghetti and they're having like kind of a regular family dinner. They say their prayers. There's a little bit of tension that she's picking up from her parents, but she's not sure what exactly it is. And tries to go about having dinner like normal, but she realizes that neither of them are eating. They're just like staring at her expectantly. And then eventually the mom asks how her date was. And she's kind of thrown off by this, a little bit confused because she's like, it wasn't a date. Like the whole high school was there. We were out just like jumping. It wasn't a date with Isaiah. And then she goes on to tell them that she just doesn't really feel that way about him. And her parents are like, well, he's a good man. He's a good man, Savannah. He's a good man, Rose, you should really consider it. Like, that goes on to lecture her about how part of the religious beliefs is I will persevere when my body does not. To live on, Dad continues, that could mean your spirit ascends to heaven or a business that you've built keeps turning a profit, or it could also mean your family line lives on, right? So she's getting pressured to be dating and taking seriously and settling down, etc., etc. And she realizes that she's not going to be able to escape this conversation. And so she ends up just saying, yeah, today was really great. Isaiah's really, really nice. And that seems to make them happy enough that now they start eating dinner. She's in the middle of thinking about Isaiah and the parents and this potential date and how this is all just like kind of weird and everybody's acting so weird. And then all of a sudden she gets this like tickle in her throat and has a coughing fit. And there's now a fly in the middle of her spaghetti, thinking that she coughed it up. And she's like, oh my God. And her parents are like, yeah, you must have swallowed it. Don't worry about it, kiddo. Like, that's so crazy. They tense up a little bit, though, talking about this. And she realizes it, but they're just saying that it's totally normal and to not worry about it. And she's like, okay. I opened my mouth to reply to her dad saying that she must have swallowed the poor thing, but this simple movement causes an abrupt spasm to overwhelm my throat. I let out an animalistic retch as a cascade of black erupts from deep within me, pouring through my esophagus and spilling across the plate. The upheaval is so sudden that my parents nearly fall backward in their chairs, letting out cries of alarm as they reflexively push away. When this ejection finally stops, I stare down in utter horror, my body trembling as my mind races to understand the bizarre squirming mass that's now heaped onto my pasta and scattered across the table. The black pile is churning and moving, crawling over itself as tiny wings flutter and miniature legs kick the air. I scream as I realize this is not some toxic liquid, but a dark porridge of living creatures, little flies born deep within my body before their sudden explosion. Chapter 2 is titled Call Now. So her dad just starts reassuring her. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay. He like goes and grabs a trash bag and just like tries to get all of the flies into the trash bag and then takes it outside. And then she realizes that he stayed out an extra long time. Like there was a couple of extra seconds that he stayed outside that he must have been spending collecting himself. But mom again reassures her and she's like, hey, it's okay. Accidents happen. Rose says, how is that an accident? And really all dad can say is that God's plan can feel pretty crazy sometimes, huh? What do you mean? I retort. I'm sick. Oh, honey, my father continues, shaking his head as he sits down and takes my hands in his. You're not sick. You must have just swallowed something in the falls. A bug in the water, mother chimes in. My instinctual reaction to reject this idea, but there's something about it that kind of makes sense. Regardless, I've yet to come up with a better explanation. My father is right about one thing. God works in mysterious ways. And then she goes on to tell her parents about how she's been feeling kind of cold lately, almost like these like weird cold body shiver draft things. And she's like, between that and the bugs, she's like, maybe I do need to go to the doctor. Like maybe there is something wrong with me. And the parents just reassure her that, hey, you know, we'll keep an eye on it, but I'm sure everything's fine. And they just like order a pizza for dinner now. Just move on, I guess. I mean, I don't know what else you could really do. And so later that night, she's in her room researching flies, like researching what type of fly that this could have been inside of her. And her dad comes in, collects her laptop, tells her that it is a sin pretty much to like be curious. Like it's one thing to like seek knowledge and it's another thing to like question God, and kind of sternly tells her to knock it off and goes to leave. And then she gets up to go and shut her door to have like some additional privacy and realizes that there's no door. There's no door on the frame. And she says, Dad, where's my door at? He says that she's never had one. And she realizes that she shouldn't be questioning him because there's this weird like look that comes across his face that she realizes that she just needs to take that answer for what it is. And so the dad then asks, he's like, hey, you know, it's been a long day. I don't blame you for feeling a little out of it. Do you want us to get a door for your room? She says, I guess. Then dad says, okay, well, I'll go to the hardware store when I have some time and see what I can do. And it should be an easy fix. So she goes to her bedroom and she's laying down in the dark and just trying to think, just kind of thinking about everything going on. And she can't stop thinking about these flies, right? And some of the information that she had found. She pulls out her phone, right? Dad took the laptop, but she still has her phone. So she's like scrolling through her phone, reading more and more about the different types of flies and what this could have been. And she gets a notification that Martina has tagged her in 5 photos. So she looks at all this and she's, you know, happy that she was there. And she's just like thinking about how beautiful Martina is. And it leads her to just like keep going through photos and like looking at all of Martina's photos. And she's just thinking about how beautiful Martina is in all of these photos. My body flushes with the heat as I shift my weight in bed, turning from side to side. My skin is tingling. Suddenly, however, the rising temperature comes to an abrupt halt. A wave of cold washes over me, chilling me to the bone. My breath catches in my throat, and I'm unsure how I should respond to this bizarre thermal shift. I look to the bedroom window, wondering if I'd accidentally left it open and allowed the cool air of the evening to slip inside. I didn't. What I do notice, however, is the slightest bit of movement from the corner of my eye. And so she's looking more and more into the darkness of her room, right? But she's just looking at her phone. So she's like, shuts her phone off. She's trying to let her eyes like acclimate to the darkness, looking around. Or she calls out for her dad to see if it was him. He doesn't respond. Suddenly a spasm in my throat. I cough and sputter as the steady flow of air is broken. This brief moment of chaos escalating to a final heave that ejects a tiny fluttering insect from my mouth. After a while of waiting, she still can't, she doesn't hear anything from her dad. She can't figure out where this fly is or anything, so she decides to get up. So she goes out to the living room where her mom is out there, clearly sleeping, and had fallen asleep watching TV. So she starts to watch the TV a little bit and reflecting about how they have the parental controls turned on, so there's only like 3 stations that they can really watch, and because of that, she's really, really familiar with the commercials. The particular commercial that is playing right now is a familiar advertisement about a local offering from my very own Kingdom of the Pine church, and the pastor is strolling calmly across a field of brilliant green grass. Behind him, several rows of stark white cabins stretch along the edge of the forest, and beyond these is a metal flagpole hoisting a massive American flag. A 1-800 number appears at the bottom of the screen, and it remains there for the entire duration of the commercial. It's a bit excessive, but it's also good marketing, and I'd be remiss to say that the Kingdom of the Pine doesn't know how to market themselves. It's what the church was founded on. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, Pastor Bend offers in a casual direct-to-camera speech. In other words, nobody's perfect. We've been blessed by the Lord to walk in the sun on this beautiful day and the smell of the Montana air, but what we do with this blessing is up to us. The pastor stops his casual stroll, and his expression changes slightly, becoming more serious as the camera begins an achingly slow zoom toward his face. Does the temptation of unnatural lust have a hold on you or someone you love? Has someone in your life found themselves in the unholy grip of same-sex attraction? Don't be ashamed. Don't be embarrassed. Be proactive. The camera cuts away from Pastor Ben to show a montage of footage from around the camp. Young people are playing baseball together, hustling around the bases and sliding into home. A group of joyful teenage girls rows a boat on the surface of a mirror calm lake. Two young men with massive crucifixes on their t-shirts playfully razz each other over dinner at the camp dining hall. A Christian rock band plays enthusiastically on a beautiful outdoor stage. The guitarist, a youthful, dark-skinned guy with an arm full of religious iconography in the form of brilliant ink. This place is cool. A life free from sin is possible, and it's waiting for you at Camp Damascus. Pete Bend continues in a voiceover as the inspiring footage continues. Kingdom of the Pine has developed a one-of-a-kind reparative therapy program for homosexual youth. We believe that a sympathetic yet firm approach is what makes Camp Damascus so special, but it's also what makes it so effective. And so then it goes on to have like a series of quote-unquote ex-gay youth that go on there and talk about their experience at Camp Damascus and how they're, living a much better life now and how much their lives have changed because of it and how happy they are. And then they go on to show like a picture of a bunch of the graduates on the bleachers. This is the only issue I have with this commercial. With a 100% success rate, there's no need to hire actors, yet the handful of acquaintances who ended up in this crowd shot claim they never went to Camp Damascus. A few of them did actually go, but when I prod about what it was like to shoot the commercial, they always have trouble finding the words. It must have been amazing. Okay, so that's kind of weird, right? Off to a weird start. The commercial fades to black, and my mother's late-night program returns to the screen, an hour of preaching from an ultra-liberal California pastor she probably shouldn't be watching, but tunes in after Dad's gone to bed. I hesitate a moment and bask in the gratitude that suddenly washes over me. Today may have been strange, but at least I'm not dealing with the torment that these poor souls at Camp Damascus are constantly battling. At least I'm not gay. The second I register this thought, I catch an unexpected vision slinking along with it. A stowaway. The fantasy comes in a flash, a startling image of another girl and me at dinner. It feels warm and cozy as we sit across from one another sipping coffee and giggling over some inside joke. I reach out and touch her left hand across the table, and she hoists her drink with the right. The silhouette of a cartoon crocodile is on her mug, but the thing that really draws my attention is just how beautiful and deep her dark brown eyes are, framed by a bob of jet black hair. As soon as the thought arrives, however, it disappears, and I'm left feeling strange and uncomfortable, my mind and body at odds with each other in their reaction to this imaginary scene of some hypothetical other life. I remind myself that 94% of people report having intrusive thoughts. Right as she's thinking this, and she looks back up, behind the TV, in the darker, corner of the room, is the creepy looking woman from the lake standing there. And when she looks at the woman, they make eye contact a little bit, and the woman begins running right at her. She yells for her mom as she hits the ground to try to dodge the woman running past her. The woman continues running and then goes into a closet and shuts the door behind her. And the mom is running over to Rose, and she's like, "Oh my God, are you okay? What's going on?" And the dad wakes up. And the dad's like, "Hey, what the hell is going on?" Blah, blah, blah. And she's like, "There's an intruder. There's a lady. She ran into the closet." And the parents share a very weird, tense exchange with their eyes that Rose catches onto. And she's like, "Seriously, guys, I know what I saw. I saw a woman run into the closet." Dad opens it. There's nobody there. "It's been a long night," my father announces, reaching out and placing his hand on my shoulder. "Everything okay, honey?" My first instinct is to protest, to tell him I'm perfectly fine and the strange woman must have slipped past him somehow, but the words won't form. Instead, I start crying again, even harder than before, as I allow the feeling to sweep me away like Noah's Ark. My parents soothe me from either side, hushing gently as I collapse into their arms. And then we go into chapter number 3, called Truth. And in this one, she's visiting her therapist, Dr. Smith. He works at the church. So this is like a free, like weekly service that she has that she goes to go and talk to him about all these different things. And her parents kind of insisted on this additional visit with him because of all the weird stuff that's going on. Dr. Smith asks her, what she thinks is going on. And she's like, I think I've just been under a lot of stress lately. I saw something really, really strange when I was at the falls with some friends, and I could have sworn I saw a lady in the woods. She was odd looking, but I didn't think much of it. She disappeared pretty quickly. Odd looking? What was so odd looking about her? Dr. Smith asks, jotting down some notes. She goes on to explain how frightening this woman was. Her really long hair, her freakishly long fingers, the solid white eye sockets. And he eventually goes on to ask her if she thinks that this woman is real. She says, I don't know. But, when my parents tried to find her in the closet where I saw her go into, she wasn't there. So I don't know. I don't know what to think. I don't know what to do with this information. And he goes on to be like, yeah, it could be stress. Stress really makes people see some weird stuff. And Rose is thinking, everyone is telling me to chill out and de-stress, that this feeling of being pulled apart like a baby before King Solomon is perfectly normal as I take a leap into adulthood. Right now, however, it certainly doesn't feel normal. I want to trust my elders and my community, yearn for that familiar blanket of security, but the proposed retelling of these events is simply refusing to fall in line. And so she goes on to ask, what if it's a demon? Dr. Smith hesitates. I can tell he's forcing himself to shift gears to approach this particular topic from a calculated angle. Demons are real, he bluntly replies. You and I both know that, but they're also not little guys running around with pitchforks and horns, and they're certainly not scary ladies in red polo shirt uniforms. Demons manifest abstractly through addiction and sin and moral decay. They manifest through temptation. So I guess my question back to you is, have you felt any temptation lately? I shake my head confidently. No. Sometimes when we're feeling something we know is wrong, it's hard for us to accept responsibility, Dr. Smith explains. We create someone or something like a monster in the closet or an imaginary friend, and we place the blame on them. When that happens, there's only one way to stop it. We must turn away from the feelings that create the monster. We must reject the temptation. Truth be told, most of the time it doesn't get this far. People tend to turn away from their demons once things get truly frightening. This is crazy. He says, have you ever heard of Pavlov's dogs? I correct him. Dr. Smith just brushes past my amendment, barreling onward. Petrov rang a bell every time he presented his dogs with food. He did this for a long time, training them, until one day he rang the bell and delivered no food. Even though there was no food, the canine bodies reacted to the bell, salivating profusely. Now, what do you think would happen if he scared the dogs every time he rang his bell? They'd be afraid of the bell. I reply flatly. He nods. God is ringing the bell for you, Rose. He's telling you to steer clear of temptation, but you're much more thoughtful than other pups. You're curious, and that can be a virtue, but it can also be a curse. Do you know what happened to the dogs that were too unruly for Petrov's research? They didn't have to worry about someone experimenting on their salivary glands, I say. Dr. Smith smiles. They were taken out back and shot in the head. That's not how the scientific method should work, I counter. God doesn't use the scientific method. So I'll ask you again, Rose, do you have any temptation in your life? I hesitate and then confidently shake my head no. And Dr. Smith dismisses her. What I recommend is a hearty dose of fun. My therapist enthusiastically suggests, your parents let me know you're going to Isaiah's birthday party tonight after school. They did? Dr. Smith leans in a bit, lowering his voice, as though he's letting me in on a little secret. All this, despite the fact there's nobody in the room to overhear us. What I think you should do is just have a good time, let loose a bit. The congregation understand kids are going to be kids. That's what the youth excursions are all about. Okay, I reply with a nod. And she goes to leave, and there's just these lingering doubts and just kind of weird things about this whole interaction and all this stuff that she's seen, and she's reflecting. And one of the things was that when he was describing the lady back to her, he said that she was wearing a red polo. And Rose is I don't think I ever told him that the creepy woman was wearing a red polo. I don't think I ever said that. I think I just described what she looked like, but I never said what she was wearing. But she's trying to shake her head of these doubts, right? She's trying to be a good believer. And she's like, okay, well, I guess if I'm going to this party, just hopefully things with Isaiah won't be too weird. I think to myself, at least Martina's going to be there. There's a faint tickle at the back of my throat, but I ignore it. So she goes to the party, whole bunch of people there. There are a handful of the kids that are from church that she recognizes, in addition to some very clearly from the other high school. Also to include Martina, right? So everybody's here. They're having a good time. They end up sitting in a circle to play truth or dare. They ask her a question and she ends up getting really like distracted and answers incredibly awkwardly, and then is staring at this TV as this like vision comes over the television that is like really, really horrifically gory, violent insanity. And she starts like shrieking, and Isaiah, turns off the TV and he's like, this is why we don't watch secular media or something. Like, it's really weird, right? This like whole thing. But she just kind of like has this weird moment, snaps back, and is trying to continue the game with everybody. So she apologizes for being weird, and then they move on. And the next person to have her truth or dare is Martina, and Martina picks dare, and she is dared to do the whole 7 minutes in heaven thing, where she picks the person who she has the biggest crush on to go into a closet together. And Rose realizes how badly that she wishes that Martina would pick her. Not that she's attracted to Martina in a weird way. She just, she just wants to be picked with her. She just wants to spend this time with her. And she just wants to be the most important person, or the person that Martina has a crush on, because that sounds really, really cool. And as Martina is like scanning the room and her eyes stop in Rose's direction, her like heart rate picks up, and she's like so incredibly excited that this is going to happen. But Martina says the name of the guy that's sitting directly behind Rose, and they go into the closet, and she gets this like wave of disappointment that she can't really pinpoint exactly. And while the rest of the circle lets out a fit of excited chatter, I just stare at Martina and watch as she rises to her feet. Parker, the guy that she chose, stands as well, and soon enough the two of them are heading toward the bedroom closet for a stomach-churning bout of alone time. Parker's not even religious, I suddenly realize. He's not a congregation member, not even a Cape Catholic or some other kind of lukewarm backslider. What the heck does Martina see in him? What doesn't she see in me? Martina and Parker slip inside the closet and shut the door, disappearing from view. The nauseating, heartbreaking sickness within me has done nothing but grow, and soon enough I found myself too overwhelmed to remain still any longer. My breathing heavy, I climb to my feet and make a break for the exit. She goes out into the hallway and she's so upset and she can't figure out what is bothering her so badly. And it's honestly kind of making it worse and making her feel even worse, because she doesn't know what these emotions are. She doesn't know where they're coming from. She just feels bad. And she gets approached in this hall by this guy that's trying to hit on her. And she ends up then like going into a bathroom to kind of hide out. And she ends up ducking into another bedroom, right? So they were all like in Isaiah's bedroom. She stepped out and then she goes into the next room over, which is like Isaiah's brothers. So she's in there, shuts the door behind her, trying to find some peace. And in the middle of this dark, dimly lit room is the creepy woman. She's like telling herself that this creepy woman is not real. This is just like a figment of her imagination. This is just the stress, like whatever. But as she's staring at this demon, she can finally make out the name tag on the peculiar red polo shirt that she wears. It reads Patchet. I'm probably saying it wrong. My bad. But it's the name of a demon. And she's like, okay, so I was right. That is what this is. That is who this is. What do you want? I ask, the words barely rattling their way from between my lips. The woman says nothing. She slowly tilts her head to the side as though this is also her first time taking me in. This moment lasts forever. And then eventually, Patchet turns and then continues walking and walks directly through the wall. Okay? Seconds later, the shrieking begins. I burst back into the truth or dare room to find everyone staring at the closet door in wide-eyed horror. A few loud thumps rumble from within, but the more apparent sounds are the gut-churning cacophony of Parker and Martina screaming in hysteric fear. It's only now that I realize this closet is directly behind the wall that Patchet just walked through. So the door to the closet opens. It's just Martina and Parker that are in there, but Martina is dead, kind of gruesomely, but she like falls to the floor dead. And Parker is like hysterical, like can't say anything, do anything, whatever. And obviously the party comes to an end as the room like erupts into a choir of screams. We go into chapter 4 called Darkness on the Edge of Town. When you shuffle off this mortal coil, your senses will likely take their leave one by one. Depending on the way your body meets its end, the exact order of these fading perceptions can vary, but everyone seems to agree on one thing. Your hearing goes last. The final spark in Martina's awareness was her friends screaming in panic and horror, blubbering over a body that couldn't feel and eyes that couldn't see. I'm supposed to be fine with this because she's in a better place now. She wasn't a member of the congregation, but she loved Jesus above all others. That counts. At least that's my take. Other things that I've learned. Around 150,000 people die every day across the globe, Martina being one of them. Cotard's syndrome is a rare mental disorder that makes people believe they are dead. The Pteropustorni jellyfish lives forever, as far as science can tell. It's the only immortal species on record. I've buried myself in death facts, devouring everything I can find on the subject. My behavior is obsessive, and I know it, but it's better than staring at the wall for hours on end, watching shadows gradually creep across my bedroom as 1,000 intrusive questions dance through my mind. What kind of God would let this happen? Is Martina really happy now? Because she certainly didn't look happy when... Explicit description of Martina's body. A shudder rolls across my frame as I revisit this terrible image, tears forming in the corners of my eyes that I swiftly wipe away. I dive back into the massive blocks of text on my phone, returning to an article about the burial customs of ancient Greece. And so this is at the point where I would just like to acknowledge, because I haven't yet, and the book doesn't do it until later, which I actually really do appreciate, but Rose is autistic, and it beyond one very, very specific line, it never gets talked about or addressed or anything otherwise. The only things that would be indicative of this as a reader would be some of the way that she interprets social cues, the ways that she is very, very blunt in the way that she speaks to some people, and then these random hyperfixations that she gets and these facts and stuff that she's spurting off. And she has a very rhythmic counting thing that she does to cope anytime anything gets stressful. It'll be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, right? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1. And she'll just go through and say all these numbers again and again and again and tap her fingers and stuff. And that's how she copes. And so there's little traits that could be attributed to being autistic, but it is, again, beyond one very particular line, never said again in this book, which I really appreciate the way that that's talked about, because I feel in other books that I've read, it'll just hit you over the head constantly with these facts or with this reminder of hey, this is something about them. This is something that you should know and you should remember about them. And it's the whole show don't tell thing. And Chuck Tingle very, very well, in my opinion, does the whole showing aspect of it. So I would like to acknowledge that. That's these hyperfixations and the rants and the random facts get sprinkled throughout this book. I'm skipping through a lot of them for the sake of telling the story, but it is happening consistently through the book. So it's not weird or a surprise when I do say this out loud, even though it might sound that way to you. That's just because the way I'm telling the story, that's not the author's fault. I just want to acknowledge that. Eventually her mom comes into the room, asks if she's, how she's doing, and offers to go on a walk with her. They're walking around the neighborhood. Her mom is telling her pretty much the town gossip about each of the houses, and then expecting Rose to then give a response about the advice that she would give to the families. What is the religious guidance? What is the Lord's recommendation or the biblical thing that these people should turn to in these events that happen to them? And Rose rattles it all off, right? Because she knows that this is what her mom is expecting her to do. And she has the answers, but more and more she doesn't feel that this is true. And more and more she's starting to kind of question these knee-jerk reactions and solutions that used to come so easy to her of what people should do to get past, these trying times and these experiences and stuff that they're going through, these temptations, these negative experiences and whatnot. And on one of the times the mom asks, what do you think? Can he be saved? About this one particular guy, and I feel nauseated. The world swaying awkwardly below me as I struggle to maintain my composure. There's a tear in my soul, a rip that started with Martina's death and continues unraveling every single day. The 4 tenets We're built for moments like this, reminders of my higher purpose in the face of doubt and desire, but the stitches this mantra provides can't hold back what's coming. Respect. I will honor when I do not understand. Integrity. I believe when I do not witness. Service. I will strive when my sin is heavy. Excellence. I will persevere when my body does not. I've followed this path since I was a little girl, and with a community of cheerful faces at my back and a loving family by my side, it always felt righteous and good. It doesn't feel righteous anymore. And with that feeling gone, something even more potent has continued to blossom within me. Curiosity. There's a line break in the chapter to indicate some amount of time has passed. It doesn't necessarily say specifically, but she's back at another appointment with Dr. Smith. And she's like looking around his office and she sees that he has some little plaques and she's looking at them and she's asking, and it's all like accreditations and awards and whatnot that he's received. But she realizes that they're all from like Christian organizations. And she's like, why don't you have anything from like an actual like school? Why don't you have your doctorate hanging up? I've learned much more from the Bible than I did any schoolwork. I choose to display the things that matter to me. And she's just like kind of in her own head. And eventually he says as much and he's like, hey, you don't really seem like yourself. She's like, I just witnessed my friend die 2 weeks ago. Yeah, obviously I'm freaking not. I'm angry. She says this in kind of an outburst. And so she pretty much immediately apologizes. And then they go on to talk, and he's like, okay, so like, who are you angry with? Like, what's going on? Are you angry at your parents? Are you angry at, me? And she says, you lied to me. You told me that demons weren't real. And he's like, I told you the opposite. I said they were real. I just said they were abstractions. And she's like, I know what I saw, and what I saw was not an abstraction. He goes on to tell her that people who witness the things you've described rarely know that they're illusory. Illusory? Oh, no. Illusory? Sure. Subjects think they're real because that's what their senses tell them. They trust their eyes, their ears, and their heart. But all of these are easily corruptible things. Are you trusting your flesh over God, and for what? For a murderer? Parker Torrance didn't murder anybody, I retort. Kingdom of the Pine is paying for the legal fees for Martinez's family, Dr. Smith informs me. I've seen the case against him, and it's not great. But why are they paying to go after him? Martinez not a member of the congregation. Why is Kingdom of the Pine even involved? Are you against charitable work now? It's just, I start even more overwhelmed than before. I want to loudly exclaim that none of this makes any sense, that the two sides of my personality are threatening to tear me in half. I don't say this, however, instead focusing on my next question, the one that's been hacking through the stitches of my aching heart like butter. Have you ever heard of the name Patchet before? I ask. Dr. Smith hesitates, the moment so slight that it barely registers. He's been working a long time because he's darn good at his job, but I'm beginning to wonder what Dr. Smith's job actually is. I think I might have heard the name before. One of the minor demons, right? So you've read Amber Mellon the Mage, I continue, because Patchet isn't anywhere in the Bible, only an obscure text from 15th century France. I read all kinds of spiritual texts. It's part of my job, Rose. What's your point? I mean, I understand being familiar with some random nonfiction bestseller by a pastor who gave a TED Talk, but Amberlin the Mage, Kingdom of the Pine, considers his work to be, and I quote, an occult abomination of lies and sin. Why are you reading that book if nobody else is allowed to? More importantly, why are you suddenly telling me it's canon? Why are you reading it? He asks. You're filling your mind with these satanic diatribes, and then you wonder why your guilt has manifested in imaginary demons? My guilt? Over what? Over sin, over temptation. I read the books because it's my duty to God, Rose. Do you understand? These texts are not meant for the impressionable minds of curious little girls who think they understand the world when they know absolutely nothing. So they both take a minute to kind of calm down, and he apologizes, and then he goes on to say that, listen, Rose, I understand it's in your nature to question these things, but I think it's time you started looking at the actual facts and accepting the reality of the situation. That's what I'm finally doing, I inform him. Are you, though? Because here's the thing. It's been 2 weeks since the murder, and during that time, these demonic visions of yours have fully disappeared. Isn't that right? I nod. Maybe that's because you've realized temptation just isn't worth it, my therapist offers. I narrow my eyes, not quite sure I understand the meaning behind this. Think about it. Consider what you can do to walk in the footsteps of Jesus, because blaming all of this on Patchet isn't going to fly. Your sin is real, but she is not. What? Is all I can think to reply, barely able to keep my voice from quaking as it tumbles from between my lips. Your sin is real, but she is not. Who? Patchet, he confirms. It feels as though the air has been sucked out of this room, and all reality upended by a single statement. After that name, I dove headfirst into research, secretly poring over the volumes of biblical lore and far-reaching occult theories that would likely give my parents a heart attack if they had any idea what I was doing. Thankfully, these days, I'm expected to mourn in deep thought and prayer, providing the perfect cover to let most obsessive parts of my curiosity run wild. I've moved on from fun facts about death. At this point, it's my sincere belief that I've read every scholarly work on Patchet in existence. And Patchet, like most demons, is always described as a man. Okay, so why is Dr. Smith describing Patchet as a woman? Unless he knows that the woman that Rose has been seeing, this like demonic, envisionment, not abstraction thing that he was alluding to before, but this like woman that she's been seeing is Patchet, right? He shouldn't have known that. He shouldn't have been able to put those pieces together, that she was insinuating they were the same, because they should have been like, right. You're picking up what I'm putting down. So she's like spiraling at this idea that he knows more than he's letting on, right? And so he turns to open up this vault in his office, and he's trying to like cover up the code so she can't see what it is, but she does. She does, in fact, see what it is, and that will be relevant later, right? He pulls out a bottle of medication and hands it to her and tells her to take some of these like anti-anxiety medications, but she realizes like the label of it, it's in Latin, and she studies Latin pretty like extensively, and she realizes that this is like a placebo pill, like a sugar pill, basically. She doesn't say anything, right? She doesn't say this. She's just like, okay, cool. And he dismisses her and ends the session. And so she gets into her car and just starts driving, right? Kind of spiraling, thinking about her family's being weird, her therapist is being weird, this whole Patchet thing, like life and her faith and everything is just not what it used to be, and everything feels off and feels bad, and she's just not really sure what's going on. And a brief moment of panic vibrates through me as I recognize that I've already been gone for way too long, but the anxiety is swiftly quelled as I reconnect with my own needs, not the needs of my parents, not the needs of the church, not even the needs of God. And her body is on autopilot as she starts to go and drive, and she ends up driving to this beach to watch the sunset and ends up spotting this girl on the beach, and it's the girl that she keeps having these weird memory type feelings of, that has like the really beautiful brown eyes and the black bob haircut. It's her, like she's here in person. She's like, oh my god, okay. So she approaches the girl and she's like, hey, I'm sorry, you look really familiar, do I know you? And the girl gets really, really upset by this question and by seeing Rose. Essentially tells Rose to F off and to leave her alone, and that she doesn't know who she is and she doesn't want her to sit by her and blah, blah, blah. But as Rose is like up this close to her and looks her in the face, she's like, I know this girl. Like, I know her somewhere deep in my soul. I know that I know her, but I don't know her name, and I don't know why she's so angry at me. But suddenly, entirely new visions are erupting through the depths of my mind, glimpses of some other life that's been lurking in the shadows far too long. I witness an endless ocean of the past, memories cascading one over another like crashing waves. I see a birthday cupcake with a single shimmering candle. I see a movie night. I see a chance meeting in a bookstore. I gaze deep into her eyes, knowing that I've seen them 1,000 times, even if I don't understand how. She's crying, tears spilling down her cheeks as she stares back at me with fury, defeat, and aching sorrow. And again, she tells Rose to go away and to leave her alone, repeating that she doesn't know her. And so Rose goes back to her car crying, and she's just sitting in her car, right? Just feeling absolutely horrible. And she gets a phone call from her dad. And in the middle of answering it and trying to talk with her dad, the phone like breaks up and gets like really, really weird. Like suddenly it sounds like somebody's screaming and it's all staticky, and then all of a sudden cuts out. Really, really strange. And so she hangs up the phone. She's like, okay, well, that was odd. Hangs it up, throws it on the passenger seat. And in that same moment, the girl from the beach that was yelling at her is knocking on her window. And she says, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. What are you talking about? I ask, confused. I shouldn't even be doing this, she mumbles. What's wrong? I beg. Can I help you? No, she cries, suddenly finding her direction. You can't help me, Rose. That's the point. My breath catches. She knows my name. Gradually, her expression softens as a potent realization washes through her. They really did a number on you, didn't they? She finally sighs. All to avoid this exact moment. Whatever it is, it looks like it didn't work, I retort. We're here. For the first time, the girl cracks a smile. Truth be told, I'm not exactly sure what I meant, but I'm glad she found the slightest kernel of joy in it. I find myself compelled to ask a question that seems ridiculous at this point, especially given the intimacy that we may have once shared. She asks for the girl's name. She winces and places her hand over her mouth, acting as though this gesture might keep the pain at bay. I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm doing here. She asks what her name is again, and the girl says, no, seriously, like, you don't understand. I'm not going to tell you my name. That's the point. Forget about me. Forget all about this. Forget about all of this and go home. And Rose goes on to say, if you really knew me, then you know that I can't do that. Understand this, the girl continues. If you approach me again, you might as well bring a gun to shoot me in the fucking head. There's a mark on both. Before she can finish, the girl erupts with a sudden cough. She staggers a bit, holding her throat, and then coughs again with even more force. This time, whatever's caught in her windpipe dislodges and spills from her lips. A handful of flies that immediately take off, buzzing in every direction. Stranger gasps, I'm so sorry, I love you. She turns and sprints back toward the park, disappearing into the darkness and leaving me to sit in a state of complete shock. I love you? I repeat back to myself. These final 3 words, the most unexpected part of our encounter. I'm not sure how, but the longer I sit with it, the more that it makes sense. She decides she's going to drive home. Right? Whatever this is that's making sense, these like pieces that she's putting together in her head, she realizes she has to go home to try to find these answers and to like mull this over and whatever. And on the drive, she turns a corner, she turns onto this dark road, comes up on a guy standing in the middle of the road and slams on her brakes before she hits him, and realizes, as he turns to look at her, he's wearing the same outfit as Patchet. The khaki pants, the red polo, the glowing white eyes, the 2 long fingers, just the absurdity, I guess, of it all. And she realizes, I'm looking at a demon. And in chapter 5, called Memory Lane, from this distance, I can barely make out what's etched into the demon's oval name tag. Squinting through the brilliant illumination of my headlights, however, the word becomes apparent. It reads Ramil. As the pale man and I stare at each other, I find myself faced with an unexpected test. Beside me is the car's automatic shifter, currently sitting in the drive position, but tempting me with a retreat in the form of a little glowing R. When it comes to sin, Kingdom of the Pine teaches avoidance to win the battle against temptation before it even begins. In the congregation, so much focus is placed on averting your eyes and shielding your heart that we rarely get around to discussing what happens once those forces have taken hold. You conquer your metaphorical demons by restricting them from your life in the first place. But what happens when a demon is standing right in front of you, watching over you with twitching fingers and sagging skin, his meandering teeth locked in the knowing smile of a hunter who's cornered their prey? The church leaders would likely tell me to run, to cut off the infection and remove this demonic force from my life. Excommunication is a powerful tool within the kingdom of the pine, and it works. The thing is, I'm beginning to doubt these philosophies apply to me anymore. And so suddenly, Ramil breaks in a sprint toward her car. And so she, gut reaction, decides that she's going to slam on the gas and hit him. But as she hits his body, he like turns into this blue glimmery glitter thing and like phases through the car. And so her eyes go wide, right? Can't believe it's like magic that she's just witnessed. And so she like turns to try to look in through the back window to see like where he is and what happened and if he's still standing. She sees that he's there, and then she hears like the rumble strip on the side of the road because she's like driving off of said road. She slams on her brakes, but it's too late, and she goes like careening down into this ditch and ends up hitting a tree. And the rest of the chapter is pretty vulgar, gruesome, bad times. So I'm just going to summarize it for you. She ends up in this car crash where she gets very, very badly hurt, and she is like trapped in the car as it starts to catch on fire. She's able to get out, and she realizes that Ramil is just like there at the edge of the clearing of this like woods kind of like around her. And so it's one of those like either she dies in this fire, or she goes out there and God knows what happens with this demon, right? No matter what, you die, but it's like, I guess, like what kind of death do you choose? And she's realizing that he won't get any closer to the fire, right? Like he'll stay away from it like to a certain degree. And so she's like, okay. She like, if she gets too far away, he comes after her. If she gets close to the fire, he goes back away. And so he's very clearly afraid of the fire. So she ends up coming up with this idea. She like reaches into the back of her car, gathers up a bunch of like the junk that she has back there, and in kind of like one fell swoop, throws that on the ground and then rolls under the car to try to like get away. And so he comes around, he approaches this lump of clothing that she has placed out there. The demon, thinking that she is the pile of clothes, and she was able to roll under the car and sneak around the tree line and then somehow get behind him. So that as he's investigating this pile of clothing that is in right outside of the driver's side door, she runs up behind him, kicks him in the back. He gets trapped in the car. She slams the door, and is like leaned against it as like fire erupts inside of the car. He's not able to escape, like the doors are broken or locked or whatever, and he can't figure out the mechanisms to get out, and the doors are jammed and whatever. And so the demon ends up like burning to death in the car, like screaming and howling, and she's just like watching as this is happening. And then the sirens come, and she's like put into an ambulance. And it is just this like crazy intense scene. And then obviously with the fire and everything going on, she's got some broken bones. She's got like all over burns on her body, some that are like very, 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 very severe. And she ends up having to spend 3 weeks in the hospital because of the damage that's done to her body from this car accident and like what happened afterward. But technically, she did kill a demon. So that's pretty cool. The one thing to note, though, before we get to talking about this hospital visit, is that when she's in the ambulance and the EMTs are tending to her, they end up giving her some like painkillers, and then at some point they start to lose her, and so they have to give her epinephrine, which is essentially like adrenaline, and she describes it, also known as adrenaline, concentrates blood around the vital organs, and is one of the few pharmaceutical lines of defense against a heart attack. Am I having a heart attack? Suddenly the chaos falls away and disperses like a low-lying fog. It's the second time I've disconnected from reality this evening, but the sensation of this round is much different than my first. There is no endless abyss, no blank void of empty space stretching forever and ever around me, because this time I'm not unconscious. I'm just really, really high. And she opens up her eyes, and she's kind of living this like dream state memory where she's hooked up to this machine, and there's a nurse that's there with her that's like administering this medication, but she's listening, and the voices around her are all people from the congregation, and it's like the pastor, and it's her therapist, and there's all these weird people, and this like weird talking, and the machine thing is so strange, and she can't move any parts of her body, and it's just really, really confusing. And she starts hearing these like robed figures start doing these like weird chants, and there's like some markings on the ground that she knows that she's being pulled to, or like she's like on a gurney almost, and they're moving her somewhere, and she's realizing that they're putting her in a very special position on the floor, or like spot on the floor, but she can't see the markings on the ground, but there has to be something because they're being so precise with what they're doing. And they start rattling off digits from the screen. Coordinate X, 700.194229. Coordinate Y, 52119.628. Coordinate Z, 6.0267. Moving on to the timeline. Coordinate A, 74. And she's just absorbing all of this. And then somebody yells that they're ready for a tether. And then the machinery springs to life, whirring louder and louder as the fluorescent lights above me flicker and sway. Several of the figures step back and make room, clearly on edge. And she looks down, and she sees this like blue shimmering light and this surge of energy tearing through the space before me like a knife across taut canvas. Frigid air erupts through this bizarre opening as distant caustic screams flood my ears. Above me, the robed figures step forward and leans over so I can finally bear witness to this familiar smiling face. Gazing back at me is Dr. Smith, who places his hands on my shoulder in an attempted gesture of care. And so as he goes to like touch her, she flings her eyes open, and then now she wakes up and she's in an actual hospital bed. Like now she's back into real life after this crash. And when she opens up her eyes, her parents are there, and they rush to come and like comfort her and hug her. And the mom is asking, if she's in any pain, and the nurse is there and gives her a little bit more morphine when she confirms that she is in pain. And then all of a sudden, the dad starts sharing some like, again, weird looks with the mom, and is really, really tense, and says, your dad needs to ask you some questions, and it's very important for you to think hard about your answers before you give them, okay? I know you weren't a part of that scene. She's like really confused, and she's like, what scene is she talking about? The accident? Of course I was at the accident. It was my car. Of course I was at the scene of the crash. And so the dad asks, what happened, and she just says, I hit a tree. I must have fallen asleep when I was driving back, and the dad asks if she had seen anything else, and she says, no, it was just bad dreams. I got to make some changes, and I got to get right with the Lord. My father's gaze intensifies. Some people say there's a trick to ending your nightmares when you're in them. Did you hear? Folks would pay a lot of money for something like that. That's $1 million secret right there. Despite my best efforts, my heart monitor is speeding up. Imagine that. Nightmares must have been around for a long time, and then suddenly there's a cure. You'd probably get in some real trouble for the folks selling chamomile tea. My father forces a laugh, glancing back at my mom as if she might also find this hilarious, but my mom doesn't react. The key to making a good joke is subverting expectations, and the easiest way to do that is through the element of surprise. To spark that involuntary laugh that you've got to tickle a part of someone's nervous system that's expecting one thing and presented with another. Personally, I don't even try doing this. My dad makes a lot of jokes, however, and while I love to hear them, I can attest that these little nuggets of humor are not exactly funny. I always know what's coming next because I spot the setups, the little white lies. I stare up at my father for a long time, mustering all the fake sincerity I can manage with what little energy's left in my battered body. Dad, I have no idea what you're talking about. Unfortunately, I do have some idea, and the implication of this causes a wave of nausea to bubble up at the pit of my stomach. The sparkle I catch in my father's eye is undeniable, however, a sign that I've hit the correct response. His body language immediately changes, relaxing as he settles in. And then moments later, her dad starts crying and saying, I'm so glad to hear that, honey. And then he goes on to say, after they're done at the crash site, some folks from the church are going to come and ask you similar questions. Just tell them exactly what you told me. Everything's going to be fine. She's just sitting there thinking, why is anybody from the congregation at the crash site? And consider what might happen if I told my father that I knew there was another body in the wreckage and that I knew it belonged to a demon. What if I informed him Dr. Smith and the Kingdom of the Pine were likely a part of all of this? Rose? My mom chimes in, breaking through the haze of my chaotic thoughts. Are you okay? Yeah, I confirm. My mother smiles. You were under for hours. We're just so glad to have you back. But I'm not back. They don't realize it yet. But I'm a completely different person. And then we go into chapter 6, called Late Night Secular Programming. So in chapter 6, called Late Night Secular Programming, she has spent 3 weeks in the hospital, slowly just losing her mind because she hasn't been allowed to have her phone or anything. It's literally just been like the TV and silence, and she's asked for a couple of books, but her parents only bring her the Bible. And then one of the nurses is kind of nice and will bring her some like gossip magazines every now and then. So on this particular night, she's walking around and she comes across one of the other patients. He has the TV on in his room and it is playing an ad or like a movie that has kind of this like sensual tension between these two women. And suddenly the air gets cold and she looks down the hallway and Patchet is waiting for her at the end of the hall. It's the first time she's seen Patchet in like 3 weeks. Freaks her out, but she ignores it and keeps walking. Because at this point, after 3 weeks of internal dialogue, she has like reaffirmed her faith and said, okay, fine, like this is all just, made up craziness, and and accepting what her father and the church have been telling her about all of this, just being internal temptation, and pretty much like she needs to get her life together. But upon seeing Patchet at this exact instance, she's piecing a little bit more and more together. And so she decides to go back to her room and she has an idea. There's no question about it. This is the temptation that I was warned about. I glance over to see Patchet standing in the hallway, putrid grin, wide, scraggly hair hanging from her scalp in awkward patches. Those white eyes, trained directly on me. Once the demon is gone and my body has warmed back up, I take another pass at summoning her. This time, instead of turning on the television and watching the erotic scenes unfold, I simply dive within my own imagination. I'm so embarrassed by the very notion of all of this that I tiptoe around with the carnal thoughts within my own mind, treating the ideas like caged animals that could attack at any moment. I'm anxious, not about what might happen when Patchet returns, but about the consequences for my identity once the whole truth is revealed. You already know the truth, I remind myself. I picture a guy, the most handsome man imaginable, standing before me as he delivers a grand romantic gesture with flowers in hand. He's shirtless, and we're on vacation in a tropical location far, far away. He surfs. We're standing on a luxurious deck while the sunset blooms in glorious technicolor behind us. Objectively speaking, this imaginary man is very sexy, I guess. He looks like a hunky amalgamation of secular superstar Harry Styles and a specific painting of Jesus I like. But to be perfectly honest with myself, I don't really care. I curiously glanced down the hospital hallway, waiting for a return of Patchet that never comes. No matter what romantic or sexual flights of fancy I imagine with my handsome suitor, there's no reaction from the demon. Not so much as a cold chill or a coughed-up mayfly. Eventually I move on, extracting myself from the imaginary bubble and continuing through the labyrinth of my mind. I know exactly where I'm headed now. It's not long before I arrive at a very specific thought, hesitating a moment before finally diving in. The moment of truth. I remember the dark-haired girl at the park. Picture the way her frantic words felt hitting my ears. I remember the tone of her voice when she cried, "I love you," and how even at that moment of chaos, I somehow knew she meant it. Closing my eyes, I dive deeper. I flash through the other memories with this mysterious stranger, unsure if they are manifestations of repressed reality or some fully manufactured fantasy. Either way, I'm cautiously drawn to these romantic scenes, both attracted to the flame and terrified of getting burned. A particular memory comes into focus. I see a girl and me in a cozy bohemian apartment. We're dancing together, jumping around with large headphones strapped over our ears and 2 long cables snaking their way across the wood floors to an old glowing stereo. They're dancing together and having this romantic moment, and she's thinking about this and holding this girl and looking into her eyes and like having the urge to kiss her. All of a sudden, she feels the cold air. And when she opens her eyes, Patchet is standing directly in front of her, like face to face with her. She expected her to be there, just didn't expect her to be that close. And Patchet grabs her finger, twists it, breaks it, and I let out a blood-curdling howl. Any previous thoughts of a dark-haired lover exorcised from my body. Patchet releases my wrist, prompting me to collapse in the hospital bed as she turns and marches toward the wall. She passes through this barrier with a faint blue shimmer, and just like that, she's gone. Gradually, the warmth returns to my body, but the pain throbbing across my hand does not subside. I gaze down to find my little finger jutting perpendicular to the rest of my digits. A warning sign. Echoing footsteps ring out from afar. A night nurse, roused by my screams. The sound grows louder as I lay back and stare at the ceiling above. It hurts, that's for sure. But there's a calm in my soul that no physical pain could ever dampen. I followed the evidence and finally reached my conclusion. A deduction impossible to believe just a few days ago that now makes perfect sense. It all fits. The more I sit with the truth, the more several lifelong points of interest begin to connect like a beautiful web. This is the final piece of a jigsaw puzzle that's been sitting right in front of me. I may be physically battered and broken, but my soul feels complete in a way that brings tears of joy to my eyes. Patchet is clearly following a system of rules I don't understand, and her attachment to me is nothing short of a mystery. I still have no idea who the girl with the short, dark hair is or why I can't remember her, but there is something I do know. I'm gay, and there's a demon out there who really doesn't want me acknowledging it. And we're at the 43% mark of the book. What a crazy, just to take a minute because we haven't really talked about the book at all. I've just been telling you about it. What a crazy metaphor for shame, pretty much, right? Like the shame that you are taught like inherently to feel when you grow up in like a very, very strictly religious household, of like anytime you even think of anything that could be seen as bad or sinful, these just horrible feelings and beating yourself up and the guilt and the shame that kind of comes with it in this quite literal physical manifestation of these things in this book. It's just really beautiful. I think this is like such an interesting premise. It is such an interesting, again, like metaphor and unpacking of a lot of the self-policing that happens, and like policing your own mind and your own thoughts and desires and whatnot in order to maintain status quo, or in order to become or to be and live out this life that everybody expects you to, or that is expected of you. And yeah, that's crazy. I'm gay and there's a demon out there who really doesn't want me acknowledging it. That's crazy. That's crazy. So there's a little bit of a time skip, and she is sneaking into the basement of the like outreach center church thing where she goes to meet with Dr. Smith. She had an appointment earlier in the day with him, and she had left one of the windows open or like unlocked or whatever in the area, like while she was at the appointment, walking around, whatever. She like unlocked this window so she could sneak back into it later in the night. She's wearing some baggy sweats, baggy hoodie. She's got her hair tied up, and she's wearing an angel mask from a school production play thing that like pretty much every high schooler has. So she's trying to be sneaky, sneaks through this window, goes into Dr. Smith's office, and she remembers the code from her appointment the other day. Puts it in there. She pulls out these files. There's like some more medication. There's a file with the names of all of the patients. And so she finds her file. But as she's digging deep through the untended emotions that float through my soul like restless ghosts, slowly disconnecting from your community, from your family is difficult. And while it seems like unearthing their sinister motives and dark secrets make the process easier, it will never entirely quell the pain. I've been avoiding this dark ache by keeping my mind busy while my body couldn't be. But it hasn't gone away. The sadness is still there, lurking in the corner like a pale demon in a red polo, just waiting to finally be acknowledged. The acknowledgement could arrive after several decades, or it could happen tonight, but the time will come. Eventually, I'll have to fully contend with the simple fact: the love I was promised is conditional. That's why I'm so fearful to open this drawer and see what's inside. And as she's like debating opening this drawer, she's realizing like, either I'm right and these memories and these things happening to me and whatnot, there's a reason, and Dr. Smith is in on it and my parents are in on it, and this is so much bigger and there's all of these other implications, or Dr. Smith has nothing to hide but his questionable credentials, and I might be forced to slow down and accept the feelings of loss that lurks above me like a patient vulture. So she opens the drawer. She finds a bunch of the medications. There's like a very organized pile of patient files, and she finds her name and she pulls it out and starts flipping through it. These notes seem deeply preoccupied with my connection to the church rather than any internal connection to myself. Dr. Smith also appears completely unaware of my place on the autism spectrum. My conscious mind was ignorant to the fact I'm gay, but even I knew I was autistic. Stranger still is Dr. Smith's constant mention of, quote, the assignment. One passage reads, Rose Darling has consistently shown resistance to the assignment, which gives reason to keep an eye on other assignments tethered using Legion breeds Delta 4 and Delta 5. It should be noted that these breeds are also displaying an unusually resilient life cycle. Another entry. The assignment of Rose Darling is particularly aggressive. It's difficult to determine whether this is a product of Rose or the assignment itself. L and L have been advised. L and L being the name of her parents. She refers to her parents by their first names. I've been saying mom and dad just to make it easier for storytelling, but something to note, okay? She's going through and she's realizing that, like, her parents have been paying for her to be going to Dr. Smith. She thought they told her that it was, like, free and it was part of the church stuff, but obviously it's not. And she goes back far enough, and I follow the dates backward until finally reaching an initial payment and then gasp aloud at the enormous number staring back at me in faded black printer ink. $500,000. She goes through, she's taken some photos with her phone of all of these documents and whatnot, and suddenly she hears footsteps. She finishes taking these photos because she's not going to take her own file with her, right? She's not going to like give herself away in such a way, but she knows that she's been found out, and she's like, well, they don't know that it's me, right? Like, they don't know who I am, but they're already suspicious of me, so I have to get going. And so as she turns to go, she sees one more file that says assignments. And so she grabs it because maybe this will have answers to this like weird reference to assignments and whatnot, right? So she grabs it, she sneaks out, and she makes a run for it. On the far right side of this page, there are two small pillars of check marks with titles Retether Suggested and Deceased. Across the top of the sheet, a headline in bold lettering, Camp Damascus Assignments. Here in Neverton, it's hard to ignore the way the camp's presence weaves its way through daily life. It is, after all, the central cog of our local economy. Without much else to export, having the world's most effective gay conversion therapy program in our backyard has been a boon to the community. Folks fly in from across the globe to change the lives of their lost children. I'm well aware that Dr. Smith works at Camp Damascus, but I'm struggling to understand how the rest of this data applies to an ex-gay ministry. Starting, again, looking at this document, I carefully scroll down the list of names to see if I recognize anyone. While most people who attend Camp Damascus are out-of-towners, it's not uncommon for Neverton residents to make their way through the program. They certainly don't like to talk about it afterward, but it does happen. When I reach my own name, I stop. I back up. I read it again and again. My hands are shaking, and I do my best to keep from succumbing to the wave of nauseated anxiety that washes through me. I've never been to Camp Damascus, I say aloud, my head spinning. Why would I go to Camp Damascus? Because you're gay, an inner voice quips. I still have my vision from the ambulance come swirling back to me like a vicious tornado, tearing through my thoughts. I remember the way the hard cement slab felt against my back, the drone of the chanting figures as it vibrated through my inner ears and crept into my skull. I still have no recollection of how I got to that place, nor how I left, but I now have a pretty good idea of where it's hidden. As I've allowed myself to blossom and change, breaking the chains of this community that tightly wrapped around my heart for so long, my perspective has also shifted. My outlook creeps along with me, lurking in the background until it's time to gaze out some unfamiliar mental window, at which point I find myself shocked by the view. What once seemed so cut and dried has warped into an absolute nightmare. Growing up in Neverton, I rarely gave Camp Damascus a second thought. As a devout follower of the Lord, it felt good to know this organization was giving people their lives back. Now that it appears something even more sinister is going on, I'm forced to reassess these feelings and confront the horrific truth that will likely haunt me for a very, very long time. There was always something sinister going on at Camp Damascus. And the raw truth is that I'm a huge part of the system already. In my own small way, I helped build this town. I recall participating in car wash fundraisers for families who couldn't afford the program. One year we raised almost $10,000 to help with renovations on the north cabins. So she continues looking at this form, and then there's another column for the assignments, and it has some demon names, and the one assigned to her is Patchet. And then several other names that she recognizes from her studies, minor demons spanning across the biblical and occult canon. And so in this moment, seeing these names and everybody, and that she can't remember, and that there is obviously something like sinister and really, really bad going on, she decides that I'm hoping for justice rather than retribution. But the heart of the matter remains. I was a cog in a terrible machine for years, and now I'm honored to be the monkey wrench dismantling it. I marinate on this as I speed through the darkness toward home, focused on my new identity as a ferocious warrior. In the back of my mind, however, I still know the real motivation here, the spark of light that stays tucked away in the depths of my subconscious thought where it won't hurt anyone. I can't dwell on her too much, but I know she's there, the girl who once loved me and who I loved back. Deep down, I know I'm doing all of this for her. I just can't admit it yet. And so in chapter 7, called Communicators, she has pretty much been going down this list, name by name, to try to talk to them to see if they remember Camp Damascus, if they have any input or insight, like, have you been seeing demons as well? Like, what, trying to figure out what's going on. She is on her 6th person that she's checked in with, and under, like, various guises, right? Like, she's not coming out and being like, hey, I went there too, and, like, there's this demon lady. Like, she's being, casual about it and trying to just test the waters. Many of them, all of them so far, don't remember a single thing. The girl that she's meeting with today is named Allie, and Allie recognizes her almost immediately, and there's like some weird tension between the two of them as they're talking in this coffee shop. And Rose is realizing that Allie does remember. Allie does remember some stuff. She just doesn't want to admit it. And it gets to this point of back and forth that she decides to come very more open with it, like the most blunt with this as she's ever been, of like, hey, I was at Camp Damascus too, and I know that you see the demon. I see it too, like in the hallway of this coffee shop, because talking about the feelings and while they were there and whatever is like triggered Allie's demon to show up. And she goes on to say, hey, I can help you get rid of it, right? Because Rose killed the other demon. She knows what it takes to kill these things. She's like, hey, I can help you get free of this. Like, we can figure something out. And this makes Allie really, really pissed off. And she tells Rose to fuck off, straight up cursing, which, by the way, in this book, Rose does not curse. She says frickin' heck. That's like one of the things they don't do, right? So this woman actually curses at her and tells her to leave. And she does. And Rose realizes that she has, like, this is the curiosity that will kill the cat. She pushed too far and too hard. And Allie is, like, crying in the coffee shop. Like, she goes out to her car and she's staring inside of it. And Allie's just, like, she can see the tears streaming down her face as she stares down the demon in the hallway. Good God, dude. And so she goes driving around a little bit and she's like regretting this, and it's just like eating her alive, because she's like, Allie had made a comment about how Rose needed to stop asking questions because their dad volunteered at church together. And she's like, yeah, our dads work together. Like, stop being weird. And so then Rose realizes that that was a veiled threat. And so she's driving around and she's like, I know Allie had to have told her dad, and my parents are going to hear this through their grapevine, and this is going to be it for me. They're going to know that I know too much. This is going to be really, really bad. And so she decides to try to get ahead of it. And she calls her dad and she says, Dad, I don't know what's going on. There's these girls and like, I just need advice. There's these girls at school that just keep spreading rumors about me. He says, oh, it's okay, Rose. Like, just come home. We can talk about it when you get here. You know, don't worry, Rose. My father insists. I've got you. I've always got you. He called me Rose. I realize. It's honey or hun, sometimes honeysuckle, but never Rose, not unless I'm in major trouble. Seriously, Dad, thank you. I'll see you soon. I pull the phone away to hang up, but in a split second, my ears catch something that sets me on edge. It's the beginning of a phrase. 4 words, yelled to someone else as my father ends the call. Those 4 words are, let me talk to, he shouts, and then complete silence. So clearly, he's talking to somebody else that's in the same room, right? And so she drives home because she's like, I don't really have a choice. I don't know what I'm walking into, but what else am I going to do? She goes driving home, and on the corner of the street, she sees her mom with a suitcase, and her mom is very clearly crying, and she's very confused by this. And so she pulls up next to her mom, and her mom says, what the hell are you doing? Nothing, just coming home. You're asking people about Camp Damascus. Why are you asking about that camp, Rose? Because you sent me there, I retort. Because we love you. Do you realize how much we spent to save your soul? Do you have any idea? $500,000, I flatly reply, then $300 a month after that. My mom hesitates, struggling to maintain her composure as I realize just how much I already know. And so her and her mom go back and forth with this like pretty heated discussion where the mom is like, was it worth it? Was all of this worth it? Like, we did all of this for you. Everything we've done is for you. And your dad's waiting back at the house with some men from the congregation. They've got zip ties and duct tape, and they're going to take you back to Camp Damascus, whether you like it or not. And I can't watch you go through that again. You might not remember it, but I will. So don't let them, I demand. Somehow a smile manages to break across my mother's face. Lisa briefly chuckles at the suggestion before sadness gradually creeps back in. It's so far past that now, Rose, she says, shaking her head. You have no idea how hard it was to convince the congregation to step back after the crash, but you still couldn't stop looking for answers. Well, now they think you found some, so it's not really our decision anymore. So her mom gives her the suitcase that she packed for her, and she yells at her and tells her to leave. And then she just drives away, and it just makes me want to cry really, really bad. There was I think 3 or 4 times in this book where I really, really actually genuinely welled up with tears, and this is one of them. And then we're going to get to the other one. But this was it's so sad because there's very clearly her mom cares for her, but just it's the whole conditional love thing like we said earlier, and it's just so sad. And so she has no other choice, and so she keeps going down this list of names that she has. She's driving around trying to find the next guy on the list. She ends up stopping for the night because she realizes that they're probably going to report. She's in her dad's car, right? Because after the car accident, hers had been totaled, and she's in her dad's car, and she realizes that it's a matter of time until it gets reported stolen, if not already, and they're already looking for it. She pulls off kind of in this little hidey spot to sleep for the night, and she's sitting there just thinking. And so I realize now that I've been doing my finger patterns across the steering wheel. There's something deeply soothing about this orderly procession, every tap in the right place while the rest of my world falls apart. A few verses about perseverance pop into my head. Matthew 24:13, Romans 2:7, and of course Galatians 6:9. But I immediately push them away. Now is not the time for obtuse 2,000-year-old advice from dead men. Instead, I look inward, crafting a proper verse of my own. Rose 1:2. She raised a flaming sword, not to rend her heart, but to seal the wound where a heart had been. For those who cast her out did not know this steadfast flame. A light with righteous anger would never cease until the heavenly kingdom fell. I select the address farthest out of town, making a mental note for tomorrow. Rose 2:6. And when the morning came, she pushed onward, because the wicked and the vile bore from every side, and onward was the only direction she had left. And so we have a little bit of a page break, and she's just been driving around trying to figure out, what to do. And when we go into chapter 8, it's called The House of Saul. Saul is the guy who lives in this house at the very, furthest out of town, very edges of town. There is a farmhouse that looks very, very run down. There's a bunch of kind of old beat up cars everywhere. and she hears this crazy music, and she follows it, and she realizes as she kind of turns the corner that it's coming from this like giant barn. And when she's able to see inside of the barn, it's immaculate. There's these like really amazing classic cars that have gotten like remodeled, refurbished, whatever the heck it's called. And so it's not that there's like a person living in this house and like letting it get dilapidated and doesn't care, or is like, you know what I mean, uncaring of the world. It's somebody who's incredibly passionate about something that has like put themselves so much into their work that they have like forgotten to take care of everything else around them. So that's kind of like this situation. Saul is so obsessed with doing cars and mechanic work and stuff that like he just doesn't take care of his house. It'll be relevant in a little bit, I promise. She's not just like being rude, judging this guy. So she comes up in the barn. She turns the corner. She's able to get his attention. He sees her. He removes his enormous metal mask. The face underneath is handsome, dark-skinned in mid-20s, featuring a faint cascade of stubble along his broad jaw. His hair is messy and his eyes are strikingly light. But the most notable thing about this man's face is the expression. He's overwhelmed with emotion. A nostalgic sadness welling behind his eyes with a smile of recognition creeps its way across his lips. He knows me. And while this was a very terrifying prospect in Allie's case, there's something deeply assuring about this man's demeanor. Rose darling, the man sighs. My own name falling from his lips in a moment so unexpected it almost bowls me over. Other than Allie, not a single person from the assignments list has recognized who I was, and none have reacted with as much genuine tenderness. But there's also a sliver of apprehension. So she like gets this like memory of him playing the guitar around the fire, and he was in the commercial that she watched earlier, like when her mom was asleep, when she had seen Patchet for the second time, or the first time in her home, second time in general. There was a very specific comment about the guy around the fire playing guitar. And so this time the memory comes back of her actually being around the fire and looking at him and them singing together. And like, she's like, I forget everything, but I remember like the feeling I had toward him, and it's friendship. And so he asks her if she remembers camp. She says a little. He asks, how was it? And she can't control herself as she like closes the distance between them and hugs him and says, not great. And then they hug, and she just like cries it out with him. Oh my God. So they go on. He gets some whiskey. You know, he tells her to have a seat, and they talk a little bit. He asks if she wants a drink, and she says no because she's 20. And I said this earlier, and I never explained it. So all of the kids that go to this like Kingdom of the Pine thing, they take 2 years off to go and have like a specific like reading, learning, religious experience thing outside of regular high school before they graduate. And so that's why they're all 20 when they graduate high school, because they take like a 2-year sabbatical basically to go and like be closer to God. So she's 20 at this moment. That's why this is all happening. Sorry, I never said that earlier. They're sitting around talking, and he's like, I remember you. You know, I was your camp counselor, and try to open up a little bit about what they remember. And he tells her to stop digging around, and she's like, I can't help it. He reveals that he went through the same thing when he started to have his memories come back, and he remembers like quite a bit, but he knows that there's still missing pieces to it all, and he's not sure what happened or why it happens or how or anything, but that he's had the same experiences that she has. And he goes on to kind of tell her what he did find, which was the church is invoking their own possessions. They assign a demon to each member of their program, a watcher to keep every graduate in line. I'm sure you've noticed. I nod, picturing Patchet's filthy, broken grin. Saul climbs to his feet, heading to a study in the next room, calling out while he roots around. The demons will keep you free of sin. They'll scare you away from impure thoughts, and typically that's enough. In extreme cases, the demons will resort to violence. Sometimes they'll torture the one who's possessed. Sometimes they'll eliminate the target of desire. Either way, Kingdom of Pine has a thriving business with a spotless success rate. What about you? I retort. You're not a success. I'm not a success. Saul returns with his thick leather-bound tome in hand. We're not successful conversions. Really? He retorts with a laugh. I'm certainly not living the gay lifestyle that I envisioned. And that also makes me want to cry. And she's like, but you're still gay. Like, I'm still gay. You're right. He nods. How did you learn this stuff? I continue, overwhelmed with curiosity. I keep hitting dead ends. Spiritual study, he reveals, returning to his seat. Prayer. I stare at my host awkwardly. Wait, after all of this, you still believe in prayer? You still believe in God? You don't? Saul counters with a laugh. There's a demon attached to you, darling. Are you really saying that the devil is out there doing wicked work, but now God is a bridge too far? He's come at this of trying to solve this mystery from like a very like spiritual place. She's come at it from like a very scientific, analytical place. And they share their findings. And ultimately, it's like, okay, so obviously, like, right, there's a God, there's another thing, like there's demons here, but also she's like, I saw the machine, like they summoned it with a machine. So obviously there's like something like tangible here that we're working with. Like science has an aspect to it as well. And she's like, so they have to be doing this portal from somewhere, but they're coming from hell. Saul counters. That's a spiritual place, not a logical one. There's no science behind hell. Why not? I retort. According to Hugh Everett III, there's infinite layers of reality stacked on top of one another. What we call hell might just be another layer. Saul bristles at this suggestion, but I push onward, surprising even myself as the words continue to spill from my mouth. I'm discovering my own sense of balance in real time, testing the edges of inspiration. That doesn't mean hell's not real or that God's not real. It's just a shift of our understanding of what that means. We're so used to looking at these things like they're outside the realm of science, but maybe they're just parts of the universe science hasn't gotten around to yet. They continue having these questions, back and forth, and we complement each other. The disposition for deep analysis might also explain why we seem to be the only ones who have managed to remember our time at Camp Damascus, albeit faintly. We haven't been blessed by some incredible superpower from the great beyond. We're just curious. And sometimes that's all it takes. So further this discussion, so Saul has also went down his own thing when he was researching it and whatnot, had broken into a couple of churches, had taken a couple of books. One of the things he had taken was this book that has a bunch of Latin in it and a bunch of illustrations, and she can read Latin and he cannot. And so it's been like very complicated for him trying to decipher this, but she takes it and she's reading through it, hoping for a concrete explanation, a step-by-step breakdown of every detail and the bizarre renderings, but unfortunately all I find are prayers. Prayer for the hungry, prayer for the broken, prayer for release. And she tells him that she'll spend some time with it, but she's got to be honest that like the pictures that are in it are significantly more helpful. They continue talking about what they found so far, and she ends up revealing to him that she's like, I'm pretty sure I exorcised one of the demons. And he says, excuse me? She's like, actually, I'm pretty sure I burned one alive. I locked Willow. Willow's the name of the raven-haired woman. She found this out from Saul during this conversation where he's like, yeah, that's who you loved. Her name was Willow, blah, blah, blah. And so the demon that she had locked in the car and had killed was Willow's demon, right? It had appeared to kill her to get rid of the threat, the same way that Patchet had appeared and killed Martina earlier in the book. And so her exorcising him had actually saved her life in that moment. She just didn't really realize that at the time. She didn't really know what she was doing, but she did the right thing, right? So Saul is amazed to hear this, right? He's like, how is this possible, though? They're so far beyond the limits of their flesh and blood, I interrupt, reminding him of the tangible nature that we've ascribed to these otherworldly beings. Saul is still unconvinced. Why would a demon burn? He asks. They're from a world of eternal flame. So he called to him, Father Abraham, have pity on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue because I am in an agony in this fire. And in that moment, some different things kind of piece together in her head, and it all falls into place. Hell is frozen, I snap, sitting upright. It's not a flaming wasteland, it's ice cold. Think about what it feels like when they're around, what happens when they open a tear into their world. Then why is every Christian painting full of fire and brimstone? Because God didn't paint those. The church did. People did. You know why Eve snacked on an apple in the Garden of Eden? Because the Hebrew and Greek text said fruit, but the Latin translation for apple was a pun with the word evil. When St. Jerome translated it, he added the pun as a little joke, and now look at every Eden depiction. All of history altered by one guy's little translation gag. That's a tiny shift, not the exact opposite thing. If demons thrive in cold and fear the heat, why make a switch? Revelation 20:15, and whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. You ever hear the story about the Vikings discovering Iceland and Greenland, then switching the names to keep the lush beauty of Iceland for themselves, I ask? Saul nods. There's your answer. It's all about control. It's always been about control. Oh, fuck, dude. What? they talk a little bit more. It goes to a paragraph break or like a chapter break thing. On the 14th of September, 1321, Dante Alighieri died in exile. He was called a lot of things: poet, artist, philosopher, but at the time his most prominent label was heretic. He was such a threat to the church that 8 years after his burial, Cardinal Bertrand de Puget demanded the man's bones be dug up and burned at the stake. Ask any historian how he died and they'll answer malaria. But history is written by the victors, and arsenic poisoning wasn't quite as easy to spot in the 14th century. I've never read Dante's Inferno, which is strictly banned in the Darling household, but after spending the last 2 weeks researching all things hellish with Saul, I know the poem pretty well. In this early epic poem, the bottom layer of hell is described as freezing cold, an icy lake where Satan dwells. This characterization didn't stick around, and look where it got Dante. Oh, this book is so good. This book is so good. So they continue researching, right? Her and Saul, trying to figure out like where these demons are coming from. How is any of this real? Like, okay, we accepted it. They're the machines and the stuff, and they're trying to get all this together, and they're trying to figure out how they can like enact revenge on Camp Damascus. Saying our enthusiasm is based on some kind of cathartic revenge would be disingenuous. The true drive behind every twisting screw and buzzing saw, every turned page and highlighted text is simple and breathtakingly obvious. It's the motivation behind nearly every epic journey since the beginning of time: love. There are people tucked away in the back of our minds who mean everything to us. And while Camp Damascus made a promise to carve them out like a tumor, this guarantee was misguided. The church makes the same assurance to all parents who abandon their sons and daughters in this terrible place, claiming they'll fix something broken. But they're wrong. I'm living, breathing proof that these conversions are all smoke and mirrors, the outward appearance of change over something that's internally immutable. Nobody's who's graduated Camp Damascus program is ex-gay. They're just even more tormented than before. They've been frightened and threatened into submission, a tactic that's been used against queer people for centuries. The only difference is that now these threats have been outsourced. In a darkly hilarious way, it all makes perfect sense. The natural culmination of a philosophy that has colored my life for 20 years. Prophet Coble taught us God wants his followers to thrive and win, that humility is important, but it certainly doesn't supersede progress and growth. Born of the Industrial Revolution, Kingdom of the Pine is very clear. When it comes to spreading God's love, you do what needs to be done. According to the congregation, my sin outweighs any discomfort about demonic collaboration. And while this might seem like impossible mental gymnastics to outsiders, it makes perfect sense to me. It's hardly the worst thing organized religion has come up with. And so this thing that they've been preparing for 2 weeks, today is the day. And so Saul goes to church beforehand so that, he can pray and find comfort and like whatever that he needs to before he goes, before they do this thing. And he still goes to church. He goes to this like non-denominational church on the outside of town, and he's found peace there. And they have some like pretty deep philosophical discussions about religion and the use of organized religion and finding community and whatnot. And she tells him, there are things I miss about my old life, like community and family and just going to church on a day like today. You've shown me how someone could find love in that book on their own terms, but too many people around here have used it for hate. Saul hesitates. You want to know what makes Kingdom of the Pine so scary? They may be ruthless and single-minded, but they're not doing things out of hate. At least they don't think they are. They're doing it out of sick, ass-backwards love. Either way, I don't want to be a part of it. Saul just nods, smiling to himself. I'm just not okay with letting them define God's love. This is my little way of doing something about it. And so she ends up tagging along with him. Like, she doesn't want to go to church with him necessarily, but she still wants to, like, be around it and be around people. And so she gets in the car with him and they drive there and they're like sitting in the parking lot having this discussion. And, her just saying like, she's just having a hard time like coming to terms with religion. And again, this is such an interesting conversation to unpack and an interesting conversation to have in a book like this, where two people that had similarly bad experiences, arguably had gone through the same negative experiences with religion, have vastly different reactions to it after the fact, of like seeking God or giving, I don't want to say giving up on God, but you know what I'm saying, turning away, I guess, like seeking God out even more so in a different way, or completely turning their back on God, which is poor phrasing, but you understand my intent here. It is a fascinating conversation to have. So the people in the parking lot, they all kind of finish like trickling inside the building. And she says, you should get in there. Don't worry about me. I'll be waiting. Saul shakes his head. Today I'll sit out here with you. It's a big night, I protest. If you want to pray, go pray. This is my service, he retorts, dropping his seat back and relaxing as faint hymns begin to drift across the parking lot toward us. The choir within is sparse and modest, a vastly different tone compared to the Kingdom of the Pine gatherings. I gradually realized Saul's words could have two distinct meanings. Either he's fine with enjoying tonight's church service from a distance, or he understands that I need company and his presence is a duty of friendship. Either way, I'm thankful that Saul's here with me. So the church service ends. You know, they've been sitting in the car listening to it all, and they drive home, and she's getting that like warm feeling in her stomach again, this like being riled up and ready to take on the world. And it's a feeling that she hasn't had since leaving church, like when she would leave church on Sundays before all of this like stuff has happened to her. And she's realizing, I'm ready to exorcise my demons. So chapter 9 is called Hell Freezes Over. And so the plan is, what they have done, the thing they've been working on, they've been setting up, is to exorcise her demon. They've like turned his workshop thing into essentially a trap. So she's going to think about Willow, right? Think about her relationship with this other woman. That will trigger Patchet to appear. They're going to trap Patchet in this like copper, in these like slabs, these like metal like slab things are going to snap closed around her, and then it's going to shoot a bunch of fire into it, and they're just going to like essentially like cremate this demon. So that's the plan. I've got it all together. He's got a bunch of like pictures set up. He's going to be up in the loft of it, kind of keeping an eye on everything in addition to all of the cameras everywhere so they can keep track of what's going on. And then they have a little wireless headphones so that they can talk to each other. So exactly what happens. It's quiet, sun setting. The moment comes, she closes her eyes and she's thinking about this. And then suddenly there's screaming in her ear and all the lights go completely pitch black. The electricity cuts. Everything cuts. She can't hear anything. It's pitch black when she opens her eyes, so she can't see where Patchet is. And she's just like waiting and hoping that everything will be okay, right? She can no longer talk to Saul. He's not in her ear anymore. And then just as suddenly as it all went away, it comes back up and Patchet is across the room from her. She is able to like hit the button to trap the demon in there before it gets to her. Thing lights on fire. And then all of a sudden, Saul appears next to her. I was really afraid when they talked about all the screaming that Saul was going to, like, die, but he did not. Thank God. I was actually genuinely upset that they were about to kill this man in front of me. I was so scared that it was going to be, like, Patchet had traded places with him somehow and, like, put him in the trap for when it closed. Or Patchet had, like, killed him before going down there and getting killed. I don't know. I was very, very worried, but that's not what happened at all. So, she's dead. They pick up the box. Patchet is just this like a humanoid figure that's just this like blackened pile, and really all that's left that you can really kind of make sense of is the name tag. And so Saul finally, he says, hey, you ever wonder why they wear name tags? It's a simple query, but shocking in the fact that I hadn't considered it much until now. I'm aware of the demon's quirky attire, obviously, but the implications behind it never really crossed my mind. So it's just kind of like weird thing to note. And she's like, well, maybe they're just like coming to work. I don't know. And so they go back upstairs to like examine all of the film, right? Because they had all the cameras running, even like right before it cut out. Like they still would have some type of footage. So they go through and they're like reviewing it. And right before it cut out, there was all that screaming that she had heard. And so it turns out that when the demons open up the portal and they're coming through, that they have their own kind of like radio frequency transmission thing. And that's what causes all of the like the lights flickering and the noises and all this other stuff. So like way earlier in the book when she was on the phone with her dad, actually no, way earlier in the book when she was at the party and on the TV screen it started flickering and being weird and she was seeing all these like terrible visions, that was because Patchet was coming. When she was on the phone with her dad and there was a suddenly screaming earlier, that's because Willow's demon guy was coming. And same with this one. On this footage, the screaming happens, and then suddenly it's like really fuzzy, and it comes back to, but it's no longer, the camera is no longer filming the room. Suddenly they're getting a feed of hell, and they're seeing these people being tortured. It's like very horrific, very like horrifically depicted. And then just as fast as it comes, it goes and it just cuts out. But they were not just random images. Like, it was intercepted, like, audio and video feeds from where this thing came from. And there's nothing else to say other than that they have seen hell and what happens to people that go there. And it's not good. So Saul decides he's going to stay up there and work through some things, continuing looking at the other files and whatnot and trying to get some stuff in order. And she goes inside the farmhouse. She's now living with him right after she left her parents. She's been living with him and cleaning up the farmhouse a bit and working on some different projects, painting the door, fixing it up, doing whatever. She goes in there and she like lays down on the couch and just cries because she's like, her demon's gone. And so she lays there and she cries, and then she like starts to think about Willow. And it's the first time that she's able to have these thoughts and these memories of her and not have to immediately stop herself and like police her thoughts. Like, she can just like linger in those moments and just like continue to see how far the memory goes. And she like just ends up crying more and more from that because she's able to actually like, it kind of feels like she's there for once. It's so sad, dude. But so Patchet is dead. She's no longer being haunted, right? She's no longer tethered to this demon, and it's not coming after her anymore for her thoughts of her girlfriend. She eventually gets up, and when she goes outside, she looks out the window, looks toward the barn thing. She sees Saul standing in the doorway of the barn, and he's wearing this like flamethrower backpack situation thing that he made. It was going to be like the last resort. So if Patchet hadn't been caught in that box and set on fire, there was like an emergency flamethrower that they could have grabbed to like burn her alive in that sense. And so now Saul has this flamethrower and he's staring off into the woods. Rose looks to the woods and she sees yet another demon. This is the tallest one, the biggest, scariest one that she's seen yet. And she can't hear what's happening because Saul is playing, like, he listens to a metal music, like really loud Christian metal band music. And it's blaring all the time. And so she can't hear what he's yelling, but she sees that he's yelling. And then all of a sudden, the demon runs at him. And then he burns it alive with the flamethrower. And so now he is released of his demon. And so in chapter 10... she had emailed Willow to meet up again. She had emailed her saying, like, hey, we're both safe. Like, will you meet up with me? And so in preparation for it, she's writing some notes on this little note card because it looks like I've set into motion what could possibly be the most important conversation of my life. No pressure. And he's like, what are you writing? Like, what are you doing exactly? And she says, I usually come up with 3 talking points, maybe 5, just facts that I can discuss or questions I can ask, I explained. This meeting's pretty specific, though. First, I'll probably tell her about the demon's weakness against fire, which I can then connect to a greater historical conspiracy from the Christian church. Did you know that there's a painting from 1495 called The Holy Family and the Mayfly? Albrecht Dürer is the painter, and it... Wait. Saul interjects, raising his hand to cut me off. I can see why you're having a hard time. Can I give you some advice? I nod. You're coming at this from the wrong angle, darling. I take a beat. He's right, but I'm not sure what to do about it. Help me, I implore. Saul laughs. When's the last time you saw Willow? A few months ago, the night of my wreck. It wasn't great. He nods. Let's treat this more like a date and less like you're teaching a history class. So, nix the questions? I translate, preparing to lose the note card. Saul immediately shakes his head. The card is your thing, darling. Never be ashamed of the card. Let's just brainstorm some date topics. My friend takes a seat on the hood next to me and starts mulling over options. And that was the other part that made me cry, if you can't tell. I think so deeply because I relate to it so heavily of like this little note card with idea topics because they're not very good in like social situations. And so Rose has these like plans all the time. And it got kind of talked about and like alluded to like earlier in the book about this whole thing where she preps for these conversations and like mentally goes through all of this so that she'll always know what to say and like how to react to people and like keep conversations going and like interpret things and like give the correct reactions and smiles and head nods and like interpreting people's different body languages so that she can always have the right reaction to them. Or in this case, prepping conversations that I have never like seen so well depicted in a book, I guess, that like I've never seen myself so much in a book before in that regard of like, oh wow, that's cool. And the fact he's like so supportive of it. There's like another thing later, and I'll just talk about it now because I'm already emotional, where she's doing her number thing, the 5 4 3 2 1 4 3 2 1 3 2 1 2 1 1 thing, and like finger tapping and like all this stuff is like, again, I've never related to a character more in my life, so this was like so emotional for me to see her friends be like so supportive and understanding of it, and like, hey, you're not wrong for it, but let's like at least help you out a little bit. And then later with the numbers thing and the tapping, her girlfriend finds it endearing versus like earlier in the book when her parents were yelling at her about it. She like found her people that are like so supportive and like love her for her and the things that make her who she is. Like they're understanding and accepting of her for who she is. Especially like when we referenced the quote earlier about the love being conditional. It's found family, guys. Anyway, so she's preparing for this date and he helps her prepare for it. And eventually she goes to this bookstore to go and meet with Willow. She doesn't really recognize the bookstore, but the owner of it obviously recognizes her, sends her back into the section, and she sees Willow and her exchange some words, and it's very, it's cute and it's hesitant, and she's trying to reassure Willow that they are safe and that, yeah, I don't remember everything, but it's coming back to me slowly, and, you know, I know that I care for you. I know that I want to be here. This is where we met. Like, I exorcised both of the demons and we don't have to worry about that in that regard. And, you know, da-da-da-da-da. Trying to get her comfortable. After a while of talking, there's kind of a silence that comes over them. And did you write notes for this? Willow asks suddenly, a knowing grin creeping across her face. You know about that? I blurt out, fighting back a deep surge of embarrassment. I know all kinds of things about you, Willow replies, laughing, and then suddenly realizing how uneasy this moment has made me. It's okay, we've brainstormed topics together. This does, in fact, make me feel better. Can I see? Willow implores. The note card? Willow nods. I pull a folded up card from my pocket and hand it over, watching as she opens it and reads quietly to herself. I watch her expression shift from amusement to adoration to deep introspection. It's dumb, I say. Willow shakes her head and then hands the note card back. And then Willow goes on this like entire spiel explaining, pretty much answering every one of the questions that she had on the note card in like essentially info dumping in a way that she's Rose is legitimately thankful for this rapid fire format. So she goes on, like, my name's Willow Krogel. I'm a Gemini, which doesn't matter because I don't believe in astrology. My favorite dessert is cinnamon rolls, and my favorite movie is The Thing. One time on a mission trip to Las Vegas, I snuck into the Great Britannica Casino, and a drunk guy gave me a $100 chip, but I was too scared to collect the cash, so now I keep it in my bedside table. I've been living on my own since a fight with my parents 3 years ago. My folks were still supporting me while I did online courses until they found out about us and cut me off. They wouldn't help me with rent unless I spent some time at Camp Damascus. That was the deal. I didn't take it seriously. I fold up the note card and slip it back into my pocket. I don't remember any of that, I admit. I remember other things, though. Willow smiles. Maybe we can fill in the blanks together. And so, let's leave, Willow blurts. If we're together, what the hell does it matter? We won. You killed 2 fucking demons. How badass is that? The story's over. Here's the happy ending. And Rose is like, I can't leave. If you know me, if you knew me and you love me, you know that I can't leave. I spent a lot of time doing work for the Kingdom of the Pine. I ran donation projects and I brought money in for the church. I thought I was helping people, and in some ways I probably was, but I was also funding some pretty horrific stuff. Namely, demonic conversion therapy. You had no way of knowing, Willow replies sympathetically. Actually, I did have a way of knowing, I continue. I should have been paying closer attention, but that's not the point. The point is, I was doing all these things because God said it was right. My whole life, that was always the motivation, but is that real, genuine good? Is something righteous? If you're doing it because you're worried about getting punished if you decline, I want to do something good, not out of fear of punishment, or because someone else told me it was the right thing. I want to do something good for goodness sake. I know I don't have to help those kids. I've got no obligation, and it would be a hell of a lot easier to just skip town with you. The fact that I don't have to do any of this is exactly the reason that I'm going back to that camp. I'll help, Willow affirms. What's the plan? So the plan is we're going to break in and smash that machine. They can't tether any demons if there's no way to summon them in the first place. Where's the machine? She asks. I'm not entirely sure, but I know how to find out. So they go to Willow's apartment. They pack up her things in a couple of like duffel bags, and they head over to Saul's house. She's now going to stay with them as well. And how she's going to find out about where this cabin is, or how she's going to find out where the machine is by taking some like mushrooms and laying flat on the ground in the dark and thinking about it. The other two are going to like leave her alone and not say anything and just make sure she doesn't like hurt herself or whatever. But she's going to try to deep dive into her mind, because the last time when she had the epinephrine or like the adrenaline shot in the hospital, that's how she was able to trigger the memories last time. So they're hoping that maybe like the psychedelic trip will have the same effect, right? So she does this, and she ends up having some visions, kind of tripping. She's realizing that she can't really like unpack her memories in this way, so she tries to go some other routes and ends up like envisioning the camp and then talking to Saul, who is back to his like previous self with less tattoos and more wholesome with his little acoustic guitar and stuff. And there's like a self-awareness in the way that he's speaking with her about like, oh, you're not here for the camp, you're here to find the machine, and then like helps kind of quiz her about where it could be. And ends up that it's in the north side of the camp, where the cabins are always under renovation, because it's like the west side houses some students, the east is the other, south is the lake, so it has to be to the north, where it's always under construction. So now she knows that, and she has a couple more like visions throughout this. And then when she comes to, she has even more feeling about where exactly it is. And Saul asks her, do you know which cabin that we need to search? I've seen the cabin, and while the mass of flies was likely just a symbolic manifestation from the depths of my subconscious, the location itself is clearly marked. However, the logical, scientifically minded part of my brain pauses. This segment of my personality has been growing stronger every day, and now the sword it wields into psychic battle is dominant. There's nothing concrete about my findings, and the assertion that any information gleaned from an abstract drug trip holds water is highly suspect. Sure, there's plenty of evidence to suggest repressed memories lie dormant in the subconscious, but reading these images like tea leaves is just as silly as the religion I've turned my back on. Is this a new Trojan horse for faith to use as it creeps back into my life? Maybe a little faith isn't so bad, a voice abruptly offers from deep within me, bubbling up from the darkness and making a profoundly simple case. Find balance between like science and faith and intuition and things like that. Oh, it's just so good. So chapter 11, we're nearing the end of the book. Chapter 11 is called Straight Street. And so Saul, Willow, and Rose are sneaking onto the campgrounds. They go in the middle of the night, right? They're dressed up, same as before, nondescript clothing, have their hair pulled back, and they're wearing angel masks, creeping through the woods, trying to like get to this north side of the cabins. Along the way, they run into a boy who's very clearly like going kind of in and out of like being there in the moment with them and like in the middle of like having a crisis. It's like really kind of weird, in threatening, and they can't really snap him out of it in any way, but eventually he ends up yelling, and then they have to hide as these other camp counselors come running over and they find him. And the boy doesn't reveal them or anything, but they like go and take him away and talk on some walkie-talkies, and he kind of disappears with them. And it's like very odd. Like it's just an odd situation that happens. They end up, no other hiccups along the way, right? They go to the cabin. They're able to like sneak through the different, not booby traps necessarily, but you know, like some windows will have the alarm set on them and different like doors and stuff, and they're able to get around it and dodge some things and whatever. And then they end up in the below area. They go down the stairway, and then all of a sudden it's all this like very like sterile metal hallways, corridors, scientific stuff that's going on, and they're trekking around, and they're just kind of like walking around all these different passageways trying to find this freaking machine. And we cautiously round a corner. I stop in my tracks, confronted by a long row of chambers lining either side of the space before me. Each cell is protected by an enormous pane of translucent glass, but it's not their high-tech construction that captures my attention. Instead, my focus is drawn to the bodies huddled in the corners of each chamber. Young adults, teenagers, and children stirred from their slumber by our unexpected visit. There are more than 30 people down here, with 1 to 3 captives in each bare metal cell. The majority of these captives remain sleeping on the floor, but the ones who notice us quickly rise to their feet with expressions of utter panic. Their terrified faces are gut-wrenching. And so they take off their masks because they realize that these kids probably freaking the frick out because they got these weird angel masks on. But they can't hear the kids because the glass is like super thick and they can't hear them screaming, like not a peep. And it's like very, very eerie. And Saul tries to grab like a hammer that he had with him, and he like is about to hit the glass. She's like, Saul, you can't, it's too loud, like we're still sneaking around here and obviously it's not going to work. Like if we can't hear them, this glass is too thick and like nothing's going to happen. You're just going to attract attention. And so he is very clearly like watching these kids in these cages, and him being a camp counselor feels guilty about all of this. He's like, this is my fault. Like I did this to who knows how many kids. And she's like, well, you didn't know, like you had no way of knowing, like you were just as brainwashed as anybody else was, you know, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like so sad. And they have to keep moving on because they don't really have a choice, right? The whole point is to try and save these kids. So they keep on trekking and having to try to mouth to explain to them that they'll come back for them. Again, horribly freaking tragic. So they go down into this next area. And when they go down to the next area, there is yet again cages almost, but it's almost like kind of canisters that's clear. And inside, it's almost like these giant like bug things that are happening. And the way that it kind of looks is like it's the same shade as the demons that they've seen, and kind of the blobbiness and the way that it's like moving around, it just has very similar vibes to these demons. And so they're like, so maybe it's larvae from the demons, or maybe something else from the same planet, right? Like Earth, like Homo sapiens aren't the only species on Earth, but like maybe this is something else like adjacent to, you know what I mean? Like maybe it's just something else from their planet or from wherever the hell they're from, right? And so they continue looking at all this, and Rose can't help but stare at one of them. And suddenly, like, turns toward her, and its mouth opens crazy wide, and it, like, throws out, like, a proboscis. Is that what it's called? Like, a little insect tongue. It's trying to, like, get at her, but it just hits the glass of the container that it's in. And then all of a sudden, eggs start coming out of the alien tongue, like, pouring all over the ground. It's so gross. I don't think those are larvae, I state, nodding up to the unhatched eggs at the bottom of the tank. Several dead flies lie scattered about them. I think it's the final product. My mind is churning through new information as I struggle to make some sense of it all. This is fascinating, but the implications are nauseating to process. For the first time, I'm a little thankful for the memory loss. Some creatures that bite need to go unnoticed. Leeches and mosquitoes evolve to secrete an anesthetic once they've attached to their host, which allows them to feed. I explained, thinking out loud. A species could easily evolve to produce something even more powerful than a simple numbing agent, something to make you forget you were ever a host to begin with. I glanced back at my friends. We've probably got some eggs in us. You do, announces an unexpected voice from the doorway on our right. So chapter 12 is called The Conqueror, and the voice that said that is, of course, Dr. Sam, her therapist. His demeanor is far from threatening, but glancing down, I notice there is a gun tightly gripped in one hand. And so begins a lecturing scripture back and forth defense and argument against what they are doing here. He's pretty much convincing them, like, hey, you're wrong. You got it all wrong. Like, yes, that's a little demon monster guy. And yes, it makes you forget your memories and lays eggs in you. And that's like a byproduct of it that we didn't anticipate, but it is what it is. Hence them having the flies happen all the time is like all kind of like triggered all back to this like same idea. So this like bug thing will bite them to make them forget things, or like to like wipe their memory essentially, and lays eggs in you. It doesn't hatch until one of the demons appears and has that weird frequency thing. So in the same way that the weird frequency messes with like the radios and messes with the transmissions and all this other stuff, it happens to also generate a type of transmission that like makes these eggs hatch. And so that's why whenever, Patchet came around, that she would like cough up a fly or multiple flies, or why Willow caught up a fly earlier in the book, like when she got really like emotional and whatever, and her demon was appearing. It's all kind of weird. Like it's like dependent to who they're tethered to. There's like some weird kind of science behind it, but that's where the flies are coming from, is from these bites to make them forget stuff, right? So anyway. So they have this like whole entire argument back and forth. He almost kind of falls for some of the stuff that they say. And he's like, oh, the devil has a clever tongue. Like, you really thought you could have convinced me, that you really thought this was going to be like a come to Jesus moment. Like, you're wrong. You know, it's too late. She's like, what do you mean it's too late? And he's like, I called for security and I hit the button for security when I saw you first coming down the stairway. It's like, oh, shit. So he has his gun. He's about to shoot them. And they're able to like kind of convince him not to quite yet. And then he's kind of like making fun of Saul for the thing that he has in his backpack, because he thinks that it is like a bug spray, like exterminator spray thing. And so he tells him to pull it out to kind of like laugh at him about it. And Saul pulls it out. It's the flamethrower. He sets the flamethrower off, not directing it at the doctor, but in the general direction. And it's like so hot in the burst of heat from it that he like falls backward, and the gun sets off as he's falling. The bullet ends up hitting one of the tanks where the thing is. And then there's this like split second, holy shit, everything's falling apart. What are we going to do? We have to make a run for it. She ends up diving over to Dr. Smith's office, and Saul and Willow are on the other side of the room, and they end up diving into like another like office closet hallway door, pretty much like the only other door in the room, right? There's like 3 doors in here. The office, the door they came from, and this other door that they happen to be standing by. So she's like, go, go, go. So they go into that room. They shut the door. She dives into this other room, shuts the door, traps the doctor in there, because now she's in his office and she has access to all these buttons. So she locks the door. She releases the larvae. She also releases hits the button to release all of the patients, right? So all the kids that they saw in those other rooms, releases all of them. And then now the larvae that are trapped in this room with Dr. Smith are making some crazy gurgling bad noises, right? Because they're like biting him and like laying eggs in him and like whatever, sucking whatever they get out of him, right? Not a good look. His body like thumps to the ground. She doesn't really know what to do. She's not really sure what's happening. She kind of wants to call out to her friends, but she doesn't want to like make anything worse or somehow attract attention, or who freaking knows, right? There's like bad stuff is happening. Suddenly she hears Dr. Smith's voice from the other side of the door, and he's like, I can't believe you left me. You left me in here with those monsters. And he still has his gun. And so he was like trying to shoot the monsters too. There's like a little bit of that. And then this time he shoots at the door handle, and he like ends up breaking the lock of the door into the office. And then he like pounds into it, pushes it open, stumbles in there. He's like standing over Rose, like about to end her life. And then all of a sudden he starts calling her Annie and starts saying like, I thought we were doing the right thing. Annie, where are you? And like very clearly like hallucinating, right? If the little bug things, these different, because there's different like strands of them, right? We talked about it earlier when it was like, oh, what's the name of it? Legion, basically, like Legion 4 and Legion 5 are having like adverse effects. So all of these legions, these different strains or breeds of these little alien larvae thing, or these little alien bug things, bit him. So all of them are having like different reactions and effects on his brain, like all at the same time. So he's kind of forgetting things. He's kind of like maybe going back in time in his memory. There's like some weird stuff. So he's just like hallucinating. And then eventually he ends up collapsing yet again onto the floor. She grabs his gun and then runs out of the room. All of the bug worm things that were in there are all like placated now, basically, because they just ate or fed off of him in some way. He had some like blood spots on him and like a little like a circle thing on his face and on his hand where they had very clearly like got him in some way, but they just ate, so they're fine. So they're like completely oblivious to her, ignoring her as she goes across the room to go and get her friends. She opens that door, and that's the door where the machine was. And so while all of this stuff was happening, Willow and Saul were in the room, Saul being a mechanic, Saul being like a car guy, like really, really familiar with machinery and all this other stuff, had taken it apart. And he's like, I took it apart as much as I could. I took all the important parts in his backpack. And he's carrying his flamethrower, and then now the backpack is filled with all of these parts. And anything that they couldn't take, they like broke and bent and did it in such a way that they like will not be able to use this machine again. I said, okay, great. Let's go. Time to go. But with the knowledge that it is probably too late, that security is probably already there. But at least this time we'll remember what happened, he announces, preparing his weapon and eyeing the exhausted worms that litter the central chamber. And we go into chapter 13, our final chapter of the book. They are like halfway through the facility when there's these like security people that approach them and they put their hands up and stuff and they're like pretty much guided outside. They come out of the building and there's bright lights everywhere, like floodlights basically from all these like vehicles all pointing right at them. And the main preacher guy is there. And so are like 4 distinct groups of people. One of them is all of the kids that they just set free from downstairs, the camp counselors, the security guards, and then the demons, all of the demons that have been assigned and associated with each of these children. And Pastor Bend is his name. Pastor Bend goes on this like whole rant at them about, you know, how they would do this and like, why would you end such good things? And he confirms that they destroyed the machine. And he's like, we paid, you know, millions of dollars for the schematic to be able to build that. And you're just like getting in God's way of like God's light and the intention and the healing and whatever. And this is all just, you know, a misunderstanding. Like, we're doing everything we can to save your souls. And this like whole thing that they all don't believe, and they're just kind of like irritated by. And eventually he's like, well, and now because you killed the little alien guys and we can't wipe your memories and the demon thing's not going to work now, like now we have to like kill you so that you don't like put the rest of this like operation you know, in danger. And so he sends 3 demons, the row of them, to go up to end Willow, Saul, and Rose's lives. As the 3 demons are approaching, Rose is going through the mental acceptance, I guess, that like she's about to die and there's so much in life that she wanted to do that she's not going to be able to do, and this just sucks. Everything sucks, and there's so much things and none of it makes any sense. There's still so many questions that she has that she wishes she could get answered. And in the middle of this like spiraling thought, as they're like watching them approach, Willow squeezes Rose's hand and she realizes that there's hope. She's like racking her brain and remembers those like weird things in that Latin book with all the pictures that Saul had given her on like day 1 when they had met again, and how there was one for the prayer for release. The image from the page is still burned into my mind. A priest standing over his disheveled captive and spontaneously releasing their bonds through some power beyond our understanding. So this got talked about earlier, kind of briefly in the description about Patchet, where she had like a collar looking thing on her neck. Well, so do these demons. So do all the demons. So she goes through and she says this prayer of release, not really knowing what she's praying for exactly, not really knowing what to do, but she's like rattling this off. And then suddenly the collar on the 3 demons directly in front of her, they fall off. And suddenly these demons that were standing up straight with this great posture and these like, you know, camp counselor outfits start like turning over, and their like joints start bending in crazy directions, and they get down on all 4s and their clothes are ripping, and they truly take on like an even more horrific like demonic form. And Pastor Bend is like, I was gonna give you an easy way out. They were just gonna kill you and you were gonna be in the kingdom's light, and now they're just gonna take you to hell and torture you. Oh shit, right? But the demons don't go after them. These demons that got set free start running around and like causing mass chaos, and they're screaming everywhere because it turns out their 3 collars weren't the only collars that got released. All the other ones got released as well. So now there's this like really chaotic scene, and there's guns going off everywhere because the security team and the camp counselors and all these people are trying to like attack these demons and, you know, like try to end them. But obviously they like phase through stuff, so bullets aren't working. Attacking them isn't working. And they're going around and like just killing people left and right. And it's incredibly gory and vicious the way that they're like hurting these people. Very grossly depicted, right? Very, you know, what you would expect to see in a book like this. Bunch of running around, bunch of chaos. So the 3 of them make a run for it. In doing so, they pick up a couple of guns off the ground from people that have already like been killed or taken away and dragged to hell. And then they turn around and start shooting at the flamethrower to try to make it explode, to cause a fire, because that's how you actually exorcise the demons, right? So they do this. A thing explodes like 3 stories into the air, and they keep running, trying to not get attacked by these demons. Along the way, they end up by Pastor Bend, where he is praying, like screaming out all these prayers and like, you know, God rebuke him, we humbly pray. He's doing his best to exorcise our demons, but the demons were never ours to begin with. We didn't summon them. We didn't nourish them. We didn't throw collars around their necks and train them. The victims of Camp Damascus were minding their own business when these forces of darkness were thrust upon us and given a name, an act perpetrated by the congregation itself. Yet despite all of this, I'm still compelled to help him. And so she tries to wave her hands to get Priest Ben's attention, to tell him to go into the woods or to stay by the fire, and that they hate fire. Obviously, almost immediately after that, there's this really gross description of what a demon does to him. And I'm not talking about it because it's icky and I don't like it and I don't want to repeat it. But essentially, the demons are going around and collecting only the adults here. We're all here, not a scratch on us. Meanwhile, the streams of horror continue ringing through the night. Camp counselors receiving judgment from the very creatures they hired to do the judging. Religious lore of all stripes teaches of entities who act as enforcers, and if you believe in these creatures, then the truth of their verdicts often comes as a package deal. If angels and demons exist, their motivations might as well fit the profile we've laid out for them. Now, however, I know the truth. Whatever these beings are, whether spiritually manifested or defined by the same science that governs the rest of us, it's clear their moral scale is not perfectly calibrated with the church's. Certainly not as much as the congregation would have me believe. I have no doubt the culture of these monsters revolves around pain, punishment, and judgment, but once the church's shackles fall away, they answer to an even higher cosmic assessment of right and wrong. What that is, I'm not sure, but it certainly doesn't have a problem with gay people. Forcing bigoted views on others and ramming them through a destructive system of conversion therapy, however, appears to be a massive ethical transgression. And so they're only attacking the security guards, the camp counselors, Pastor Ben, obviously, but they look over and they see the huddle of the kids that they released from the pretty much the dungeons or the depths below. The kids are all fine. Nobody's batting an eye at them. Nobody's trying to hurt them at all. And so the kids realize that as well. Particularly the kid that they ran into in the forest. He kind of takes on this leadership role, and he's talking to them and getting the kids all riled up, and then they end up getting the branches and making little torches and getting the little torches on fire with the big flames that are happening around them. And then all of the kids with their torches start booking it for Camp Damascus proper, because they're going to burn down the camp. As Camp Damascus continues to burn, echoes of snapping wood and bone filling the air, our trio turns and disappears into the forest. We're headed the opposite direction, taking our time without the threat of demons or the people who haphazardly wield them. We move in silence. It's not long before we arrive back at Willow's vehicle, standing on the edge of the mountain and gazing across Neverton below. It's an absolutely glorious vista, and while I've witnessed it plenty of times, there's something special about tonight's. A weight has been lifted. Not just from us, but from every victim of that terrible place. I glance over to catch Saul, enjoying a similar moment of reflection. Willow steps next to me, and as she does, I turn to meet her gaze. Our eyes lock, and suddenly a powerful urge overtakes my body. "Hey," is all she says. A million little things communicated within the breathless tone of this singular word. I can't help the smile that works its way across my lips, an uncontrollable display of the lurking joy that bubbles its way to the surface and fully consumes me. We don't hesitate, refusing to wait a second longer before our lips meet in a passionate eruption. We melt into each other, all the stress and strain and fear that kept us at arm's length finally crumbling away. This is so much better than the memory of our last kiss. Not only thanks to the visceral warmth of her body against mine, but for the future that lies outstretched before us. This isn't just some hazy recollection that could dissipate at any moment. It's the real thing. Memories come and go, but the present is ours. Within the softness of her lips and the tickle of her hair as it frames my cheeks, I discover a safety unlike anything I've ever known. A sense of true acceptance. Meanwhile, the flames continue billowing into the sky behind us, a raging inferno where Camp Damascus once stood. The blaze is so large that its orange, mountainside glow illuminates the entire Neverton Valley. My shadow stretches on for miles, engulfing the city below. And that's the end of the book. That's the end of the book. I thought it was really interesting. Yeah, I don't think I really have anything else to say. Got some good commentary, very relatable, very interesting. I do wonder what some of the critiques are. I haven't really looked on Goodreads. I guess we could do that together real quick. I guess we could look at some of the commentary on Goodreads is criticizing that it was very predictable, that internal demons are the actual demons, and you pretty much know that from the start, that there's not very much character development or deep character, growth or anything that kind of happens in the book. Some people said the pacing was off, and then just that it wasn't generally scary. There's some body horror and there's bugs, and that's it. But there wasn't actual like fear instilled in you at any point, which I don't think is wrong. Like, I don't think any of the negative comments on Goodreads are incorrect in their assessment. But I think if you look at it, maybe I'm so new to the horror and thriller genre area in the world that, like, I still think it's good because I don't really have any, like, crazy things to compare it to. Like, I don't really have any expectations when I go into the genre reading that. For me, reading about bugs and gory stuff is enough. Like, that's enough for me to consider it of that genre. So I don't really have, like, a high threshold or, like, a high bar there. Maybe I would agree with the character development, again, if I didn't relate so much to the main character. If I didn't relate so much to a lot in this book, maybe I would feel differently. Maybe I'm a little blinded, a little biased, and I'm willing to admit that. I'm mature enough to admit that about myself. So I don't know. I enjoyed it, though. What do you think? Did you like it? Was it scary? Did you know what was happening the whole time? Were you ever on the edge of your seat? I don't know. Let me know. And if you have any other thriller recommendations, I've gotten so many amazing ones, and I really appreciate the people that have taken the time to comment on, like, the Frida McFadden one and let me know, and, like, have given me other recommendations and stuff. Comment down below. Let me know what you got. Later this week, I'll be doing yet another Frida McFadden, and then we might move on to maybe a Karen Slaughter. Maybe something crazy. We'll see. I think I have a couple other ones too. If you've made it to the end of this video, you get the insight of what the future holds for us all. No, maybe that's all I have so far. Oh, I wanted to do The Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose. Somebody requested that one, and I was reading through the blurb on that, and I was like, oh my God, that's so messy. But that's just more of like a messy thing. And like, just a general, like, what the fuck am I reading? But it's still considered like a thriller, psychological thriller, mystery, suspense adjacent thing. So still, I think what's Colleen Hoover's best friend's name? Tarryn Fisher. The Wife by Tarryn Fisher. That was on my list too, because that's another just like, what the hell kind of thriller crazy one that I wanted to do this month. I can't remember what else. So yeah, if you have any more recommendations, let me know. I'm just like, this is an interesting genre. I think specifically for this format and the way that I do books, I think this is fun and different than what we usually do. So we're going to keep going down this path for a little while. I'll sprinkle in some other things along the way. Who knows what else I'll do. I still need to do Animal Farm by George Orwell, and I need to do some more casual classics. I will get back to that, I promise. And I know I keep saying that, and you're probably thinking, Kaylee, you literally said that the last like 2 or 3 weeks. To which I would say, shh, I know I did, okay? Be patient, I'm trying, okay? So yeah, we'll see what happens next. Again, as always, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate each and every single one of you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.